I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies, I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and I've been playing so much Dragon Quest lately that I'm starting to wonder, am I the Yusha?
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and proud owner of an educational leadership micro-credential as certified by the Texas Computer Education Association.
Boy, it sounds like I've been having more fun lately. I don't know, man.
I've got a micro, not a mini credential, it's a micro credential.
That's okay. That sounds passive aggressive. Like, why would you call it that? Like,
I don't know. I don't know why they can't just call it a credential.
Yeah.
I don't know why they have to call it a micro credential. But every time I saw that word, it made me laugh when I was at a conference, which we'll talk about a bit today.
Yeah, like philosophically, I don't understand how you subdivide a credential. It feels like fairly binary to me. Either you can do the thing or you can't. Yeah.
I'm sure there's some sort of technical language somewhere from like the TEA, the Texas Education Association, that's like, well, this is what you have to do to get a credential on your certificate, and so this isn't enough hours, so it has to be a quote-unquote micro-credential.
Right. Well, anyway, yeah, so you're going to talk about that. I've got some Dragon Quest games to talk about. We've got other things to go over. This is just our typical stuff episode for the month of February, coming at you in the middle of the month because we've been busy with lots of things, including for this, as you just mentioned, you were at a conference, so you were out of town.
Yes, yeah. So I was out of town for basically a whole week where I was at a conference called TCEA, or I had to look it up because I had no idea what it stands for, the Texas Computer Education Association conference. Which was held in San Antonio, traditionally held in Austin, but the Austin Convention Center has been torn down and they're replacing it. So it was in San Antonio. And so I was in San Antonio for a whole week looking at technology stuff. There was a robot that was walking around the convention center. That's not what I had anything to do with because it's a huge conference. And I just was there for a very one slice of it as a high school teacher, but it's also designed for librarians, administrators, engineering, teachers, science, STEM programs, all that kind of stuff. It's a very, very big technology and education focused conference that is hosted in Texas, but really it's big enough that people come around from everywhere. I met a bunch of teachers from like Ohio and Wyoming and stuff like that while I was there. So that took up both going there, which was like a whole week, took up a lot of my time this past several weeks, but also the thing especially when you're a public school teacher, I'm sure this is true of many other jobs as well, but when you basically take a week off of work, obviously I was still doing basically work stuff while I was there for the conference, but obviously a week out of the classroom, that's so much fucking work. Like, that's so much fucking work to have everything designed and prepared ahead of time for students to be able to complete things autonomously, because you can never trust a sub to be able to give a lesson. And so like the week leading up to it was just brutal. And the week coming back is brutal because then you have to deal with the fact that only a certain proportion of the students have actually done the work they're supposed to do over that week, because again, you can't trust a sub to run a lesson. You're going to have a lot of students that got away with doing very little, and so then you're having to play a bunch of catch up on all these meetings and emails and stuff. So I have very precious little fun stuff to talk about on the podcast today. So my stuff section is going to be very brief on today's podcast, other than talking about some of the interesting things of not just the conference, but also some cool stuff in San Antonio, like I saw the Alamo and things like that.
Well, nice. The historical Alamo, or you went to one of the Draft House locations?
No, the actual proper Alamo, the one that was a very old building that a bunch of people attacked a long time ago because they wanted the land that America stole from them. Which is not how the Alamo presents that conflict, but that's what that conflict was.
So I'm very confused here, Sean, because my understanding was substitute preparation was just giving them the VHS tapes that they showed during class. There's more to it than that? I just thought you gave them the tapes and then they pressed play.
Yeah, I just got the Donald Duck math magic or whatever the fuck that was. I'm not a math teacher. I just fished that out in the power of 10. And then I was like, and then show them Shrek in Spanish. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, they expect you to actually give them work to do. So I took a thing that was a like in-person paper lesson and turned it into a totally digital activity. Because I was like, there is no way that the sub is going to be able to manage this full task. So let me make it digital so it is self-directed so that the kids who are on top of their shit actually do it, which the ones who are on top of their stuff did actually do it, which made me happy.
Well, that's nice. Is this a new thing? Is this a Texas thing, or did we just have bad teachers when we were kids? Because, again, my memory of substitute teachers is pressing play on the Donald and Math Magic Land tape.
Yeah, it might also just be my desire to have, like, them actually do stuff.
Yes.
I don't know. I can't speak to other teachers and their approach for sub stuff. I mean, I feel like if I was gone without a lot of advance notice, right? Like if I was sick all of a sudden and I was out for a day, I probably would have something like that, where I do have some videos that I have at the ready. Obviously they're not on VHS tapes. Education is slow to adopt new technology, but it's not that slow.
Are they a DVD now?
I've got a fucking Google Drive with a bunch of shit I have ripped from DVDs. So they originally did come from DVDs. But yes, for this I was gone for a full week of instructional time.
Right.
So I imagine the administrators would probably not be particularly thrilled if they were just watching a random movie for an entire week in my class when I wasn't there.
You know what, Sean? I was at Walmart the other day, and I saw in the DVD aisle they had a new DVD set of the old BBC Chronicles of Narnia, which in my memory is one of those like substitute videos. Or for me specifically, when I was in elementary school, it was when there was a rainy day and we couldn't go outside for recess. They would show us that, and it was the most boring thing I'd ever seen in my life. But it's like 9 hours long, and it was only $10. Should I get that for you and send it to you? So if you're ever gone for a week again, there you go. That's the whole week is Chronicles of Narnia BBC with the like puppet Aslan.
Yes, and it's all a big Christian allegory, so that's going to go great. It'll just nobody can get mad at me because, like I say, it's Aslan the lion. He's like Jesus, so you can't be upset. We're in Texas.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. This is getting way off topic, but I'm having fun talking about it. So
yes,
there you go.
I will talk more stuff from that conference later because there's a lot that happened, and I've got a surprising story involving Phil Collins.
Okay. Wow.
That's your teaser.
Sean, personal friend of Phil Collins now. That's my assumption is what this means. And he's going to be guesting on the podcast next week for a retrospective of the classic Disney movie Tarzan. Is that where we're going with this?
That's absolutely, I don't know why you're spoiling it, but yes.
Okay. But first up, just a quick piece of housekeeping. Just a reminder that we are premiering Japanimation Station Season 6, Part 1 on March 15th, 2026. It'll be airing Sunday nights on YouTube, Mondays wherever you get your podcasts. We did a little preview episode in all of our podcast feeds a couple weeks ago, announcing the new season, giving you the formal premiere date. This is our Tomino-thon season, where we will be talking about the works of one, Mr. Tomino Yoshiyuki, and his delightfully deranged mind. And we are splitting this season in half. This first season will be going up through everything he did up to Zeta Gundam, which will be covered then in the second half of the season. And so there's a ton of fun stuff to come. We've had a lot of fun working on this season. We're very excited to finally premiere it. We've got a brand new theme song for this season that Sean, you did the lyrics for. My brother Thomas, our in-house composer, Occasional Thomas, did the music for, and then I edited the theme song video. And I think you just got to see that, Sean, and it rocks. And I'm very excited for everyone to hear that.
Yes, it is a very exciting season. We've gone in with a lot of preparation. We've done more research for this one. I imported some books from Japan as part of the research process, which has been fun. And yes, we have a sick theme song, sung as always by the great Hatsune Miku. I'm very glad that she's always willing to work with us. It's been a great experience.
Yeah, Hatsune Miku, luckily her agent knows our agents, and they get in a room, they hammer it out. Kaito is also on this one, another Vocaloid, just for you Vocaloid nerds out there. The only Vocaloid nerd I know is Thomas, but I'm sure there are others.
There's if people listen to this in Japan, then there's a lot.
Yes, that's true.
Japan, not nearly as many.
Yes. All right. But that's the housekeeping. Anything else before we get into the news, Sean?
No, I think we got a good stack of news. So let's go ahead and get into it. What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Well, first up, in a bit of movie news, Kathleen Kennedy has departed Lucasfilm after 14 years as the head of the studio. She took over that role a little bit before the sale to Disney. No, it was during the sale to Disney. It's just that The Force Awakens didn't come out until 2015. So that's when that all happened, was like 2010, 2011. In any case, she is being replaced by two people. Dave Filoni, who you might know from all the Star Wars stuff, is becoming president and chief creative officer, while Lywen Brennan serves as co-president. Filoni he's Filoni. He created the Clone Wars. He created the character of Ahsoka Tano, so he's now come back and done a bunch of stuff in that, corner of the world recently. And Brennan has been at Lucasfilm since 1999. She specifically served as general manager since 2015. So this is a very continuity-minded decision. In an exit interview Kennedy did with Deadline, she confirmed that this had been in the plan for years now. These were her picks. And as we kind of suspected, Filoni had been doing more producer stuff in the last couple of years because she wanted him to have more experience in that vein before taking over the job. Because Filoni had been a director and a writer and stuff, but not necessarily produced other people's projects. So that's why he's been doing a lot of that. In that interview, though, she was also pretty candid, in a diplomatic way, of course, about how much Star Wars fans fucking suck and how hard that was to deal with. It does not sound like she will miss that part of the job. She was asked what her biggest regret was, and she said it was Solo, but not for the mismanagement that prompted the director swap and the reshoots and the exploding costs on that movie. She says instead, we were so excited about that idea, and then when you're into something and you realize fundamentally, conceptually, you cannot replace Han Solo, at least right now. I'm just gonna tell you, Kathleen, that was not the problem with Solo. Yeah. There were other things going on with that movie. Anyway, she also updated the progress on the, fuck ton of Star Wars films that have been announced and never made. We know there was a James Mangold project that he was writing with Beau Willimon, the writer of House of Cards. She says that's an incredible script, but it broke the mold and is now on hold. Taika Waititi was working on something. She says, again, loves the script, but says she is now out of the decision loop on that, and that will be decided by the people in charge now. Donald Glover has turned in a script for the Lando Calrissian project. There is the entire, I don't know if we've talked about this on the show yet, Sean, but this has been a huge controversy, is that Adam Driver enlisted Steven Soderbergh and Steven Soderbergh's frequent screenwriting partner, Scott Burns, to write a new movie about Ben Solo that would have followed up on the sequel trilogy. Kennedy loves it. Everyone we've heard from thinks it's a great script. But as Kennedy confirmed what we've heard, which is that Disney vetoed this. Bob Iger vetoed this, not anyone at Lucasfilm. And that is why that seemingly cash cow project has not been made. Okay. We know Rian Johnson had been working on other Star Wars movies after The Last Jedi. She says that he's mainly been working on the Knives Out films, which has been the holdup there, but also says, I do believe he got spooked by the online negativity. I think Rian made one of the best Star Wars movies. He's a brilliant filmmaker and he got spooked. This is the rough part. When people come into this space, I have every filmmaker and actor say to me, what's going to happen? They're a little scared. What a fun time to be making movies, Sean. But she also makes pretty clear in this interview that Disney leadership has been the stumbling block on most of this. She says that when she took the job, Bob Iger told her to be bold, but that was never what she felt was rewarded thereafter, and implies that the current regime at Disney is not willing to take risks. And there's a strong sense of frustration throughout that interview with what she was not able to get done. Kennedy obviously was, if you look at her tenure, able to get some riskier projects through. By all accounts, Andor only exists because she championed it and went to the mat for that one. But you can only go to the mat for so many things in a corporate structure like that. And it sounds like a lot of these more interesting projects that we could have been getting have mostly been vetoed by Disney. So that ends this chapter of Lucasfilm. We've got a new chapter with, a very different person in Dave Filoni in charge, mixed with someone who's more in the kind of the producer day-to-day spirit in Lywen Brennan. And I'm, curious what happens next. Star Wars is coming back to movie theaters this year and next year. We've got 2 movies on the horizon, but it is still a pretty unsure time for the whole world of Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars, has definitely been in a very strange place for a long time. I mean, it's gone through a couple of sort of strange phases, because there was the initial phase of the Disney buyout in the kind of that first run with the sequel movies where, Force Awakens was a big crowd pleaser, but not I think even people who really like that movie would agree, not a great sort of like building block for another era of Star Wars media. Like it's not a thing that created like an excitement and opened up lots of projects, as you can tell, because there's been precious little set in the time period of the sequel trilogy. Like notably, the vast majority of the development that's been done of other projects in Star Wars has this period has either been stuff set between episode 3 and episode 4, or stuff set after episode 6 but before episode 7, and we just don't go to the sequel movie era kind of ever. And then there was this like the whole sort of initial strategy they had of let's just fucking pump out these movies, bro, and let's just make a movie every year, and we have all these spin-off movies of the Star Wars stories, and then that obviously just sort of like fizzled out, and then there's just been this just seeming array of different movies that they've been teasing, or like you hear scripts have gotten passed and stuff. I mean, there's the whole thing of like the guys from Game of Thrones, you know, that they were going to leave that to do a Star Wars project that then, you know, never materialized. I mean, it's just been this whole litany of projects, particularly in the movie sphere for Star Wars, that have just seemingly died on the vine. And that has just continued for a long time at this point. So I'm very curious to see what this new era kind of will entail, particularly for that side of things, for Star Wars in the movie theater, because I feel like, you know, Filoni has been really deep into the TV side of Star Wars and the sort of streaming side of Star Wars the whole time, obviously going all the way back to Clone Wars and stuff, but also in the Disney era, you know, he's one of the main creatives behind Mandalorian, and many of the other projects, and they've continued to do lots of animated projects, most of which Dave Filoni is not like the lead creative on, but he's involved in some way in stuff like Bad Batch and everything, obviously in the Tales of the Jedi and all these little animated shows they've been doing. So yeah, I'm definitely very curious where Star Wars goes from here, because I do think it still has like a fundamental problem of it still feels like it is an overly closed box that they are playing in, because again, that sequel trilogy stuff just did not open up another sort of avenue of storytelling, and so everything feels like it's trying to play within a very sort of small sphere. And the couple of places where they've sort of broken out of that a little bit, like with the show Acolyte, which I watched, I thought was like a decent show. Obviously, it didn't do amazing numbers and ended up not getting a sequel. But the thing that was interesting about it was set much earlier than anything live action Star Wars has ever gone before. And it just felt like, oh, this is a different perspective on how to do Star Wars stuff that also is just sort of removed from a lot of the baggage of setting things around the original series of movies. So I'm just curious what Star Wars does in a more long-term fashion. Like, are there plans to try to start a kind of another era of the franchise, or are they going to continue to kind of like mine the much more narrow territory that Star Wars, it feels like, has ended up in, where it's just sort of like purely sort of like for a certain core fan base, and it doesn't feel like it's trying to expand that. It's not trying to bring in younger viewers, right? Like, it's just like the franchise feels like it's in a really awkward place, similar to, I think, what has happened with Marvel.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that, and I think this is the thing Dave Filoni has to figure out going forward, is how hard does future stuff rely on the existing chains of continuity, because that has been a law of diminishing returns lately. I know that, like, if you're someone who saw all of Clone Wars and Rebels and, like, you know, was super into that the later Mandalorian, you know, Ahsoka, all of that stuff, like, is probably really cool and thrilling. If you're not, it can be pretty alienating, and I think that is a question moving forward of how heavily we continue to go down that road. You know, the next two movies, we've got the Mandalorian movie, and I'm very curious how much that movie is that going to be just a purely standalone Mandalorian Grogu adventure where even if you haven't seen all of the show, you're going to be fine and it's kind of for everyone? Or is it going to be more like another like stealth Star Wars Rebels sequel? You know, we'll see. Star Wars Starfighter, which is the 2027 movie by Sean Levy starring Ryan Gosling. That one does seem like a concerted effort to try to bring in a new audience, a younger audience. It's Ryan Gosling is the big star, but the main character of that movie we know is a little kid played by an actor a young actor named Flynn Gray. And that seems like it's more in the vein of the show Star Wars Skeleton Key, which I didn't watch, but I know, or Skeleton Crew is what it was called. That was also supposed to be more of kind of a young adult Star Wars thing. That was the one with Jude Law. And so, we'll see what comes of that one. That's 2026 and 2027. There's really no long-term plans that we know of outside of that. We know that Simon Kinberg, the guy who destroyed the X-Men franchise on multiple occasions, is working on a new trilogy of some sort. But, we'll see what comes of that. I think Dave
there have been a lot of people working on a new trilogy of some sort in the last 10 years. So any of those announcements I'm just deeply skeptical of.
Yeah, Kennedy's update on that was that it's being in the works, but she is out of the loop on that because that is now under the purview of the Filoni, regime here now. But also all of this could be vetoed by Bob Iger at any point. I mean, that's the thing. If you look back at Kennedy's run at Lucasfilm, in most way, by most metrics, it was actually very, very successful. They made 5 Star Wars movies while Kennedy was president. 4 of them grossed over $1 billion. One of them was Solo, which lost a lot of money. But, 1 out of 5 ain't bad. The fact that each movie did less than the one before it, up to, The Rise of Skywalker, which just barely got over $1 billion, and because of out-of-control costs on that movie, did not turn a profit, even though it grossed $1 billion. That's obviously disconcerting. On TV, they did have a lot of successes. The Mandalorian is huge. Andor, didn't necessarily light the world on fire in terms of ratings, but it was a huge critical success that got that's a kind of thing you do want for your franchise, is something that interests the core audience. It did expand, I think, the critical world of Star Wars. It's the only Star Wars thing in this era that got a lot of awards attention at the Emmys and stuff like that. And, you had other things that people liked, but you had a lot that didn't kind of go anywhere. I do just think you need, and this is where hopefully Filoni can be the right hand at the wheel, someone who can guide this under some kind of clear direction for the future of the franchise. And I don't mean that everything has to be moving in the same direction under the same story. I don't think it should be a Marvel-style thing. I don't think that's what Star Wars should be. But I do think there needs to be more coherence. And Filoni is the person other than George Lucas with the deepest roots in all of this. So he is probably the right person to figure that out. But we'll see. I think the fact that Iger keeps vetoing promising sounding projects is going to make that job really hard. And I wonder if anyone can succeed if, the Soderbergh thing, that is the craziest movie story I've heard in years, that there is just ready to go a new Star Wars movie that verifiable movie star Adam Driver wants to star in, that a major director who often makes weird things but has made blockbusters in the past, the Ocean's movies and stuff like that, Steven Soderbergh was ready to direct. You had a script. Everyone who's touched it says it's great. And Disney just said no to that is nuts to me. That, I've never heard of anything like that, where something gets that far along and then a studio says no. That is really bizarre to me. And I think if that's the kind of situation we're in, I wonder how long Filoni even lasts if that's how it continues,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just that bigger question of Disney sort of flailing at the wheel as it has with all of its sort of major stuff for a long time at this point. It's just as a big Star Wars fan, I just really don't know what to do. If I were given charge, what do you do with it? It's really hard to know, how do you even approach this? And I do think, the sequel trilogy of movies just so poisoned the well at a certain point where it becomes hard to be it feels like you have to either just go say, we're going to create a, sort of new starting place for a, range of Star Wars stories that's way in the future or way in the past. They kind of have tried to do that with a lot of the ancillary media with this whole High Republic setting, which is what the Acolyte show was set in. But it also feels it's weird that I don't know how the mainstream broader audience would receive that. It's hard to know, if you have something that's so disentangled and doesn't have any clear connective bridge from the Star Wars stuff that they know, are you going to get a big audience to see that? Whereas if you had something that was in the position where the sequel trilogy was, which could bridge to a more open setting for the world that gives you more stuff to do and kind of more toys for storytellers to play with. I think that could have worked really well, and that's just not in the way that the prequel movies did, right? Like, I think clearly the thing you want to do, as much as there are a bunch of people who, poo-poo the prequel films, it's like the prequel films were huge for Star Wars' ability to reignite itself as a major media property, because it wasn't just those movies, which obviously had a complicated critical reception, but were big hits, but also created all the space for successful TV shows and video games and comic books and novels that all took place in that period, that people who liked the prequel movies, which were kids at the time, like myself, really enjoyed getting into that other kind of stuff. And so those prequel films served as a starting point for a much bigger media presence. And the sequel trilogy has just done the exact opposite for the brand. So I really am curious, and I just don't really know, like, how do you resolve that problem, and where do you go, and how do you, like, what does Star Wars look like in the future is a very complicated question. And I do not envy Dave Filoni being in a position to having to figure that out while also working under the Disney overlords.
I don't envy that position at all. This is why I just coming back to it, the Ben Solo project does sound like a good idea to me, is because
he was also the breakout character. It felt like he was the character that people responded to the best was Kylo Ren.
Yes, and Rise of Skywalker is such a salt the earth movie for Star Wars that you need. I really do think they need to do something to fix that. And I understand you can't just, like, erase the movie and make a new episode 9. I might like that, but it would be tough to sell. But doing this, of, like, put a coda on it, put a new spin on it, where you can, or like they were also talking about doing something with Daisy Ridley and Rey, like, you do need to do something to, like, extend that and give it some kind of different ending that allows for new stories to be told. Because if you do just leave it where they left it, you're fucked. Like, that's a really tough place to have left the story. And I feel like starting up again, using this character, and as you say, the breakout character of those movies, it would get butts in seats. I think there would be all upside to doing that. Like, even if it were just a modest moneymaker, and I'm guessing you could get a lot of money out of something like this, but even if it were a modest moneymaker, it would be good for the long-term health of the franchise to have that as a building block.
Yes, I definitely agree that, because like, I was surprised when I heard that news and how, like, good it felt, of like, yeah, that fucking, I mean, obviously, there's just, it's really talented people behind it, so you just get excited for it there. But just the idea of, like, oh, like, maybe you could do something with this character who, nominally dies, I think. That movie, a lot of the details of the plot of that movie are gone. I'm pretty sure he died. But fucking who cares?
Right.
You could bring him back. Or
that's the thing, Sean. If you got a big polling organization, and I know they have better things to do, but if they took the week off of polling, like, economics and immigration data, and you had them poll a random sample of Americans who saw Rise of Skywalker, what percentage would remember that Ben Solo died?
A very small number.
Yeah.
A vanishingly small number. This is like, I think, did he become good again? I think he had a blue lightsaber, I think. I don't know. It's like,
did they kiss?
My memory stops there.
Yeah, it's just... So yeah, I mean, that's something you can do. I don't know. It's an interesting moment. I feel like The Mandalorian and Grogu, whatever that movie turns out to be, is actually going to tell us a lot about the future of this franchise.
I agree.
I still haven't watched Mandalorian Season 3. I'm going to go back and catch up on it. But if that has the kind of reception Mandalorian Season 3 had, that would feel probably poor. But if it is like a big populist, like, you can take your mom to this one who's never seen The Mandalorian, and she's like, this is good Star Wars, that's probably good for the brand. I don't know. And I'm not saying that, by the way, as any qualitative judgment on Mandalorian Season 3. I know, like, you liked it. Other people I've heard from liked it. Some people hated it. But, like, the reception overall was chilly. Maybe in part because it leaned more on legacy stuff. I don't know. Yes. But, like, it needs... Clearly, like, you can do anything with The Mandalorian and Grogu. You can just have them go on a random adventure. It doesn't have to be connected to anything. And so, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and I think, like, whatever they do, I think the movies have to stay in this big populist Star Wars space. They have to be very approachable movies that have like big themes that do the things you expect of Star Wars movies. Which despite the naysayers is something that the prequel movies did. And it's why they've generated such a passionate response, because they're very accessible films that are touching on like very fundamental themes that are very powerful for the audience. And were very present of their moment, continue to be present now, but, they're very movies of the war on terror and all that kind of stuff. In just the way that the original Star Wars movies were very Vietnam War, Cold War era films. And so I think you need to do something like that has that big populist kind of streak to it. And I think it's good for the smaller side projects to get into the nerdy bullshit. Which is what Mandalorian Season 3 did. I really enjoyed Mandalorian Season 3. I think it's the weakest of those 3 seasons. But it absolutely is a show for people who are into the nerdy bullshit. And you need to keep those people satisfied, and it's totally good to have stuff that's for those people. It's what like a lot of the animated projects have been. But I think there is a thing where you also have to recognize that you can't have those things have like tens of millions of dollars of budget per episode and stuff like that. Like, they have to be lean productions that are not, these insane monstrous things that so much of modern streaming television has become. That the stuff that keeps the nerds happy should be lean and efficient. And again, like on the side and on streaming platforms, and stuff like the Tales of the Jedi projects and things like that they have been doing have been really cool, as these are like side stories that clearly are not things that they're spending an insane amount of money on. That I think that the brand needs to like sort of realign itself on there and prioritize its budget appropriately, because I think that's part of what has happened, is that you have these shows like Acolyte and Ahsoka that are hugely expensive shows that are for a smaller audience than these other projects. And you've just got to make that shit make sense. Obviously, it's a similar thing that Marvel did, is just keep on targeting a smaller sort of subset of people until you have kind of shaved almost everybody away, and you're making very expensive projects for basically nobody anymore. And I don't think Star Wars has gotten to that level, but if it keeps on going on that path, it will.
Yeah. Star Wars has a lot more potential upside at this moment in time than Marvel does. Marvel as a brand, I think, is probably irrevocably fucked, at least in the Kevin Feige incarnation. Like, I do not, unless like Doomsday has a reception that I am not expecting, I think that brand is kind of in the toilet. Star Wars, you can always turn it around. They have not done anything that is completely like irrevocable at this point, but it's just, and Star Wars has had a ton of great stuff recently. Like, that's the Kathleen Kennedy regime. Yes, it includes The Rise of Skywalker. It also includes Andor. It includes The Last Jedi. It includes, the best parts of The Mandalorian and lots of other good choices they've made. So, I still love me some Star Wars and want to see what they do with it.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm very curious to see where they go.
All right. You want to shift into talk about some video games?
Yes, a lot of video game news has happened over the past month. A lot more than you expect. Usually late January, February is like a very quiet time for video game announcements and stuff, but just a lot of shit's been going down.
Yeah, so we have a Nintendo Direct partner showcase and a Sony State of Play. Probably that feels like the biggest Sony State of Play in years. I don't remember the last time one made this much news. We'll go over those in a minute. First off, a couple of kind of one-off pieces of news. The first of which is what I have called here the sad, cruel saga of High Guard. So High Guard, if you haven't heard, was a new free-to-play hero shooter from Wildlight Entertainment, a new studio formed by former Respawn employees, the people behind Apex Legends. That game launched on January 26th. I actually downloaded it to my PS5 on that day, planning to at least check it out, because it's free to play. But just 2 weeks later, on February 11th, Wildlight laid off almost all of its employees, leaving only a core team in place to support the game. And when I read that, I realized, I haven't even booted up my PS5 since then. And when I did, I just deleted the game, knowing probably no point in trying it now. This is a dead game. This comes after a chilly-turned-toxic reception to the game's reveal at the Game Awards in December. Sean, is this a complete... Do you think it is at all possible to enter this genre now, or is it a closed thing and it is just Overwatch and whatever already exists?
I think if you're someone trying to make a free to play shooter, kind of any variety, whether
Yeah.
it's your hero shooter, or there's kind of two main varieties of hero shooters. You have your Overwatch, and then you have like Valorant, which is kind of like hero shooter, but it's Counter Strike. Um, or you're doing your battle royale thing, which is Apex Legends, Fortnite, PUBG, right? Yeah, like I think you are playing with a very, very big, very scary, terrifying fire that is going to consume you completely, almost certainly. Because yeah, this story is just like wild from a whole bunch of different perspectives. Like one thing that's just crazy is the whole cycle of its kind of announcement and reveal. And there's some pretty interesting kind of like op-eds in the world of what video game journalism now is, which is a lot of people who used to be employed at publications that now run their own Substack. This is like sad. This you can't really go to big publications for this stuff anymore. But there's interesting interviews and kind of stuff telling this whole story that we now understand, which is originally this game was going to be shadow dropped a la Apex Legends, right? This is a studio developed or like formed by a bunch of former Apex Legends people. If you don't remember, Apex Legends came out the day it was released. And so there were like these vague rumors swirling before the release of Apex that like, oh, Respawn, the Titanfall people are doing something. And there was these kind of murmurs because some press had gotten access to the game to release reviews and previews or like review content and stuff like that when the game was released. But then the game kind of came out all of a sudden. It was free to play. You could just check it out. And it was like a really successful strategy. Now, I don't know if that strategy could be replicated now because the market's in such a different place. Those kinds of battle royale games are still relatively new, but Apex Legends still came out in a point where I remember the sentiment being held by me and like other game critics and stuff like that it was already a filled market because Fortnite and PUBG were already so big even at that point. But Apex Legends carved out a very nice, respectable chunk of that market for itself. And I think that strategy of the put your money where your mouth is and just fucking release the game and show off how good it is, and let people just play it immediately and not have a big, long preview cycle and trailers and all that kind of shit to allow this sort of like toxic attention to sort of like fester, which is what happens with so many of these games. I think this is one of the big things that happened with Concord is that game was, had all these trailers a year, 2 years out, and it kept on being shown at State of Plays, and it allowed people who did not like the game or, people like influencers who make their bucks through harvesting this very toxic negativity online about whatever the projects are, especially anything that has characters who are of color or women and stuff and shit like that, and the things that are quote unquote woke. And if you allow that to fester for super long, by the time the game comes out, it's like either you're someone who incredibly hates it because you've bought into the toxic negativity, or you're someone who doesn't want to even think about it because it's in the perimeter of this kind of toxic negativity. And I think just sucks enthusiasm out of any project when that stuff becomes too intense. And so Highguard was originally going to have that same release model of Apex Legends, but instead, Jeff Keighley went to the studio. He had seen a preview of the game, and he was like, hey, let me put this into the Game Awards. Not only let me put this into the Game Awards, let me make this the last thing shown in the Game Awards. So it was like the one more thing style reveal at the end was this free-to-play hero shooter. And it just got the capital G gamers very, very angry online on Twitch and YouTube. Be like, what's this fucking bullshit? And they just did their whole fucking thing. Tore the game to shreds. And Wildlight Entertainment stuck with their original kind of strategy, which was, we don't want to talk about the game until the game is out because we want the game to speak for itself, is what the Apex Legends strategy was. And so they just had total, blocked out like studio silence on all that stuff up until the game was released, not really showing anything else, not commenting on anything. I don't know if that would have fixed anything or would have helped in any way or potentially made things worse, but that was their approach. And so by the time the game released, the internet at large had made up its mind about it. There was already this dedicated hate campaign of people, streamers and influencers and stuff talking about it online. And so the game, even though the game did actually do very good numbers, it's not like it was a dead game at launch. the sentiment has been so negative around it. Even though, like, from what I've heard from people who've played it, it seems like it's a good game. I'm not really in the market to play these kind of games, so I didn't check it out. But it seems like it's a totally good game. Again, there were actually a decent number of people playing it. It had things like 90,000 concurrent users on Steam or something like that, which is a good number. But yes, clearly, whatever's going on behind the scenes, you have to assume the game is not going to be in a very healthy place if they are laying off most of their employees. And it's just another in a long line of instances of this kind of thing where I think it's just clear that this market is so full of these kind of products that it is very hard for you to kind of like build a niche for yourself. And the market is so actively hostile. And the online platforms reward that hostility so much and incentivize that hostility so much that it's just kind of, the Star Wars stuff is obviously connected to this as well. It's like kind of what happened with Last Jedi and all of that is all part of the same like structure. But one of those hotbeds of that kind of attention is absolutely this kind of free-to-play multiplayer game space, where for whatever reason it's stuck to people's fucking craws, and they want to rip the game to pieces, and it's just weird. And it's a weird, as you say, a sad, cruel saga. It is just a strange place, and it sucks. Again, like, I personally am not that interested in these kinds of games. It's just at this point in my life, I don't have enough time to play games. That multiplayer games feel kind of fruitless for me, that I want something that I can make kind of progress in and finish and be done with. And so I like, even multiplayer games I really enjoy, like Call of Duty, I only play for a relatively short amount of time. So I'm just not in the market for a game like this. But for me, if you're someone who's not interested in playing a free-to-play shooter, the attitude should be, I'm not interested in this, and you move on with your life. It's not, I'm going to either be a content creator and create all this intense negative content to stir up controversy around it, or I'm going to be a consumer of that content and obsessively follow this game I'm saying that I hate and have no interest in playing, and I'm professing represents everything terrible about the video game industry and what video games are these days. It's like, just fucking ignore it. There's so many games coming out. Hundreds of games are released every day. There is no shortage of video games for you to play of whatever variety of game that you're interested in. If it's something you don't care about, just move on with your life, but people are incapable of doing this.
Oh, of course people are incapable of this. Yeah, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. When I saw that announcement at the Game Awards, my reaction was a very strong eye roll of like, I can't believe someone else is doing this. This is stupid. But I didn't go online and harass anyone about it. I really didn't think about it at all. And like, I do think that reaction in me speaks to the general problem, which I think there is just a kind of general eye roll, because I think this genre is, as you say, Sean, it's just manifestly oversaturated. And that is a problem. But then there is the toxicity issue. I think their instincts were 100% correct, and Jeff Keighley is not someone you should be listening to about any of this. And hopefully people will not do that again. I feel like they have some kind of like personal injury lawsuit to file against Jeff Keighley for that, because oh my God. But yeah, I don't know if a shadow drop would have saved this game, but it would have given it the best shot at arriving and speaking to people on its own terms, where it would have arrived just as the game, not as the meta text around the game. And that meta text that meta conversation can get so toxic so fast. It did here. That was gross. It was sad. I feel bad for everyone laid off and everyone who worked on it, Just because you work hard on a game, that does not mean you are guaranteed success, obviously. And it does not mean you are guaranteed positive reception or any of that. But, you should be guaranteed a fair shake. And I don't feel like they got that. I don't know the internal dynamics of this new studio well enough to know if this was, a fair, equitable way to handle this. Who the hell knows? But it's a situation that sucks. And, I do think it's really hard for me to imagine anyone else trying this in the near future. And I feel like if anyone else is like deep in development on something like this, and they're going, it's that Arrested Development meme of, no, it hasn't worked for any of them, but it might work for us. You gotta change course. It's not gonna work for you. And we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, it just definitely feels like you need to be something that, like, if you're going to be in this multiplayer space, you have to be something that is not a hero shooter or is not a battle royale. It's the only possible way you can make a multiplayer game these days, I think. Because the last one of the multiplayer game that was a big hit was Arc Raiders last year, and that's an extraction shooter. So that's like a very different kind of genre that had not yet had a big popular kind of example. So it's like you have to find something that really stands out for you, I think, for you to be able to pull people over. Because it's just such a saturated market. You can't compete with Overwatch. I know the Overwatch feels like it constantly stumbles because I think it does, but it still has such a massive fucking audience, and it keeps reclaiming that audience bit by bit, even when it starts shedding them and then it gets them back. And then obviously, like, Fortnite is just this, you cannot possibly compete with Fortnite. It's just like what an insane notion for anyone to even try to approach the gravity of that game. It's just that's an impossible task. So yeah, like and it does feel like a lot of the industry has learned this lesson, in that I think we are getting less of these. I think it's something you can see when we get into the Sony state of play, that it's very clear that Sony has shifted direction, and they've got some things that are still, they did announce that like Horizon multiplayer game or whatever. I'm not particularly interested in it, so I didn't even put it on this outline. But like they've got some leftover legacy projects that are from that direction when they're trying to compete in that space. And then everything else is like way more, we are pushing in a different direction with this. We're trying to make a wider variety of games. Like it does feel like the larger industry, the people that have survived it so far, are seeing that there's like a different direction they need to move in order to survive right now in this kind of very difficult market video games are in at the moment.
Yeah. That all sounds about right. So do you want to move on to our next sad piece? We've got a couple bad pieces of news before we get to anything good, guys. All right, so Valve has announced that they are delaying the Steam Machine. The Steam Machine didn't have an official release date, but they did say Q1 of 2026. It's not going to be in Q1. They're now saying first half of the year, so maybe by, midsummer. But they are also still saying they cannot determine or announce pricing yet. And the reason I also wanted to put this on the outline is just super recently, as we're recording this on Valentine's Day weekend, is it's become clear that the Steam Deck is completely sold out through all official channels. You cannot buy it. You could get it on a secondhand market or something, but on any official channels, it is just gone. They had already discontinued the LCD model, so it was just the more expensive OLED model, but even that now is just completely missing in action, and there's no official word about that. But all of this, of course, points to the continued crisis in RAM pricing, which we haven't necessarily seen hit Sony and Nintendo, who maybe had enough stock or have enough of deals there that they're not yet massively impacted by it. But Valve isn't selling these things at the kind of scale that would protect them from that. Yeah. And so we're seeing that develop here. And this seems like just a very ominous sign for the future of video games at this moment.
Yeah, it's one of those where you just feel so bad for Valve in the situation where it's just, you couldn't fucking, design the timing to be more horrendous of that original announcement for the Steam Machine and their new VR headset, because it's just as they were announcing it, it's oh, fuck, dude, RAM all of a sudden is 100% more expensive than it was a year ago. And then it's getting worse and worse. And it was the moment they announced those devices, it was clear that the sort of after effects and the shock of the AI kind of gold rush was just devastating the whole hardware market for personal computing. And it has continued to do so. There has just been a litany of rumors about the next gen consoles from Sony and Microsoft, whether or not the Microsoft that you call a console. But whatever those, next products they're working on, there's this whole massive array of sort of insider buzz around them potentially leaking, or sorry, not leaking, them potentially delaying the release of next gen hardware. I mean, it's very hard to tell how much of that is legitimately insider info and how much is that people trying to just read the tea leaves of the market's so fucked, surely they would do this. But it's just I don't know how you could release a big new piece of hardware in this market right now, other than to you're just in a position where you kind of have to do it, and hope that you can just kind of ride it out for long enough for something more reasonable to sort of stabilize in the market, and you can make more predictable decisions about your business. But releasing it right now, I mean, it's just so insane in just the fluctuation and the chaos that's in the personal computing market. Like trying to release a product in it is madness. So it makes sense to me that they're like, again, as I say, they hadn't even said what the date was, and it's just a very interesting blog post that's kind of like, hey guys, yeah, eventually.
We're on hold. The airplane is in the air, waiting for permission to land. We are just circling the airport. That's what we are doing here,
Yeah, but since they hadn't officially announced a release date, and they're saying that we can't announce a release date, it's such a weird statement where they can't say anything about the things that they don't know what it is. So it's just it's rare that you see a company statement that feels like it's a massive shrug and just a Jim from The Office look into camera. But that's basically what it's like. The PR equivalent of that is kind of what Steam or Valve had to do.
Yeah, it definitely feels like that. It's just it really feels like right now the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be the most regular console launch for a long time to come. That was the last of a bygone era. And the Switch 2 console launch had some of its own oddities in certainly some of the pricing, although fairly modest price bumps over the Switch 1 compared to what we're staring down the barrel of now. And so we shall see what the fuck happens next. The thought of there's a couple things going on with, I think, the Sony thing, which is that one, in part because they put all their eggs in a bunch of unrealized hero shooter games that never came out. This generation has had almost no games from Sony. But then also just all the other reasons, it does not feel like it's time to move on to a PS6. But then it really doesn't if you're going to ask us to pay $2,000 for it or whatever the fuck it would be in this market. Or if they can even get the RAM. That's the other question is it's not even just a matter of cost. Can you even get it? Can you get it at scale? On existing hardware, they presumably have contracts in place to get this stuff. But if you're doing new hardware, you have to have new contract. It's all of this is nuts.
Yeah, if there's any saving grace, it is that the video game industry is now in this position where the kind of that even if they released a PlayStation 6, all those PlayStation 6 games will be playable on PS5 for a very long period of time, where games are just scalable at this point of development in the nature of how this technology works, that it's it feels like they could do it, whereas if you're talking about the PS1 to the PS2 transition, maybe that's a bad example because they did put a PS1 in the PS2 so it could be backwards compatible. But if you're going...
Do PS3 to PS4. That's where we had a hard break. There was nothing worked between them, If
it was the PS3 to PS4 transition, you'd be totally fucked, right? Because it's if all the developers are wanting to or have started working on games designed for this next generation of hardware that are not designed to be able to run on the old one because the generations are different enough, you have to make a different fucking game in order for it to, you can't, and it's sort of like the PS1, PS2 for all of those. You had to make two different fucking games, basically, for them to run, right? Gun on the original Xbox and Gun on Xbox 360 are two different video games. That's just, I don't know, that's the one game that popped off the top of my head that was a cross-gen game when the Xbox 360 came out. All you gun lovers out there, you know what I'm talking about. That game was shit. I rented it and it was bad. But anyways, the video game industry was in a place at that point where the nature of hardware and development was that something like this, I think, would have just killed the console market, a la the video game crash. And it was just been if you play video games, you're on a PC for 5 years. And that's the only place you could do it. Now it feels like the video game industry is in a place where it can weather that storm because there are so many other sort of avenues for getting revenue with free-to-play games and microtransactions and all this shit. Sony still has a very large percentage of players playing on the PlayStation 4 and just playing games like Fortnite or Genshin Impact or whatever, and do not need to or can't really afford to upgrade to the PlayStation 5. Really can't afford to now because that shit just gets more and more expensive over time. And so, I think the video game industry is in a place where you can weather this and you could delay next-gen hardware, and it's a thing that you could realistically manage in a way that has really never been true about this industry. And so it's if there's one saving grace, it is that you could still keep on making PS5 games for years And then eventually when the PS6 comes out, here's our free patch, or here's the $10 remastered version of whatever it is, and that's totally can work. That's kind of what the Switch 2 has been. And it's just like very clear that that's just where this hardware is. And there are some things that are kind of sad about that, because there's something very exciting about how extreme hardware transitions used to be when the jumps were so much bigger. But there's also something really convenient about it. And it definitely has worked out for the video game industry's benefit that is happening now, and that they are in a position now to be able to weather that kind of storm in a way they never would have been before.
Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where, like, the big game release this month is Resident Evil Requiem, and that is a PS5 game with a day-and-date Switch 2 version that, by all accounts, is perfectly fine, playable, 60 FPS, good to go on Switch 2. So, like, and that, that does not happen, and that will not happen for every single game, but it's happening for a lot of games. And if that is the situation we're in, then there is a lot of scalability. I actually was just curious, because you were talking about that with the PS4, and I was looking, and I had forgotten, does Sony still sell the PS4? I don't think they do new anymore, but I did just look at the PS4 on Best Buy. You can get a refurb PS4 from Best Buy for $150. Honestly, if you're on a budget, that's like still a good option. That's like still a pretty decent, like, if you just want to play some games, there's some new stuff you won't get, but honestly not that much.
Yeah, and again, if like the kinds of games you're interested in are like the big mass market hyper popular ones that tend to be free to play, like if you're a younger kid or something like that, the PS4 is a totally valid choice. And I think Sony would have probably continued to sell the PS4 and kind of manufacture it at a relative scale for longer if it hadn't been for COVID. Like, that's the thing that happened, was their manufacturing lines were so fucked over by COVID that they could barely make enough PS5s. And so the PS4's sort of like afterlife was cut extremely short than otherwise would have been. It's just been it's been a very weird place for a while now for video games, for things that have really very little to do with video games. Obviously there are certain choices and certain things the industry has done that have fucked it over, but so much of it is like COVID. I mean, because we're still, to be clear, like, the games coming out right now are still games that were directly affected by COVID because they were at some point in the development process. Like, we're only starting to get some games that began pre-production after COVID. The COVID pandemic sort of was slowing down. The vast majority of games released today are still ones that were in production or pre-production while the pandemic was underfoot. And so it's like we are, it's a thing that as a teacher, I continue to see is like each year, where is that sort of like normative level of social development you would have historically expected for a 14-year-old. And it just keeps on getting better and better each year, where you're like, oh my God, they can talk to people and they're like, they can be sociable. Like, they're like some of those sort of soft skills that were, emaciated over the course of the pandemic in their developmental years. You're seeing that generation of kids starting to come of age where that was long enough ago that it's not as severe of an impact. And that's kind of, the video game industry is still in that place as well.
Yeah. I'm still on this Best Buy page, Sean. You can get a refurbished PlayStation 4 Pro for $200, and right next to it is the PlayStation 5 Pro at $750. What an illustration of where we are at. You could either get the PS4 Pro will play a lot of stuff now in very good quality. You would be, if you do not have a modern console, you would be very happy with that for your $200. Or you could pay $550 more than the original launch price of the PS5 for a Pro system that doesn't even have a disc drive in it. Wow, what a world we're in, Sean.
It's fucking wild. And that shit's only going to get more expensive, is the other crazy part.
You could buy a PS4 Pro and a Nintendo Switch 2 and still have money left over versus buying a PS5 Pro. Yeah. God, we're fucked. We're so fucked. All right, Sean, I put this on the outline because I need you to do some explaining to me.
Okay.
I want you to explain to me what the heck is going on with Yakuza Kiwami 3, which launched this week and has generated a lot of controversy among fans. And I don't know the in-depth of like this era of Yakuza enough to understand all of it, other than I did see that they cut out a whole like subplot with a trans character, and that seems sad and shitty. But like, what's going on? Why are people up in arms about Yakuza Kiwami 3?
Okay, just to preface what I'm about to say, I've not played Yakuza Kiwami 3 and Dark Ties is the technical title for this game because it has that add-on or whatever. But I've sort of like vaguely followed some of what is going on here. And also I'm not also like even really committed to playing Kiwami 3 because I played the original Yakuza 3 or the Yakuza 3 remastered. So I don't feel like an incredible urge to play Kiwami 3 in the way that I did for the original Kiwami and Kiwami 2, which those are remakes of the PS2 Yakuza games that were not particularly easily accessible in any other way. So those are the versions of those games I played. I might end up getting to Kiwami 3 if I have a gap in other stuff I want to play, but it's not a game that I'm like, I have to play it no matter what. So the controversy, the big controversy, particularly I think over here, like I can't speak to because I haven't read up and looked at the Japanese reactions. So just keep that in mind that I'm not speaking from like the Japanese fan base. I don't know what they're talking about or feeling about this game. But I would say like the biggest and most real controversy around this is about the recasting of a specific character in the game with a different actor who has a controversy attached to him. So there's a character in the game called Go Hamazaki. He's sort of one of the antagonists of the game, not the primary antagonist, but sort of a secondary one. And that character was, I don't have it pulled up. I don't remember what his original actor was, but he was originally played by a film TV actor, as is the custom of these games, and has been true for most of the big remakes. They have recast a lot of those because they re-record all the dialogue, they redo all the performances, and so they've recast lots of those characters, particularly ones played by famous film TV actors. And the person who is now playing Hamazaki is an actor named Teruyuki Kagawa. Now, Teruyuki Kagawa had a controversy where there were allegations of sexual assault made against him in 2022. And so I think this is like, broadly speaking, this is a Me Too style controversy where this is an actor who had allegations of sexual assault levied against him, and they have cast him in this game regardless. I do not know any of the details about those allegations. Like, I have not read that deep into this, so I can't provide any commentary there. But it seems like a highly questionable choice, bare minimum, to make this kind of recast with this sort of actor that has this intense controversy and in all likelihood could be someone who committed sexual assault. And so that is, to me, that is like the big thing that feels really skeezy. And I just think like, why the fuck would you have done this? Especially when there's there's the sort of weird history with this franchise where they have done recasts. For instance, they recast a character of the original Judgment after that game was released because the original actor used cocaine, basically, and so there are drug allegations against him. And so they totally recast him. They redid that character, re-recorded all the stuff, redid the character model to look like the new actor. And they did all that for a game that had already been released over someone using drugs. And here they're just straight up casting a guy who has sexual assault allegations, which is far more disgusting and is far more morally disgusting action than someone using cocaine. And so that to me is like the real controversy and the thing that I think is very gross. But then there's a lot of other stuff around it. And so one is what you were implying before, where there is a side story in Yakuza 3, which is the first Yakuza game that had like a huge number of these sort of sub or side stories. Like Yakuza 3 is kind of like the first quote unquote modern Yakuza game. It was the first PS3 one. And so it was the one that kind of built broadly the model that most of the Yakuza games are made going forward, especially 3, 4, 5, 0 are all in that same engine, all have the same kind of basic structure. So the game has a lot of sub-stories. One of the original Yakuza 3 sub-stories is one that involves a trans character that is like a broadly speaking positive sort of story about this trans character. It involves a person who is actually trans. like a real world person who's included in the game. And then that sub-story in the remaster, if I remember correctly, was originally removed from... It was removed from the game in the original English release. And so that already had this thing of like when they brought the game over here, they took out that sub-story back in like 2006, 2007. Then in the remaster, they put it back in. So if you play Yakuza 3 Remastered, it includes that sub-story. I'll be honest, I don't remember any of the details of that sub-story because the sub-stories of Yakuza 3 are very brief. So I don't remember how, like, what the actual content of it was other than vaguely of like, right, that was there. It is not in this version of the game. Now, context for that is a huge number of the sub-stories are not in the game. So it's not like they specifically just took this one out. They redid almost all of the side content. They've redone all of the mini games. That original sub-story was attached to one of the mini games that is not in Yakuza 3 Kiwami because they've redone all the side content. So I've seen that story be passed around as a, like, they're transphobic because they specifically removed this sub-story. I think that's a weird way to read it. Now, you can still be upset about it not being included, and I think there's a lot of, like, fans that are upset about the amount of content that was removed or changed in this full ground-up remake. This is a complete remake of the game on a different engine. It's in the Dragon engine. I would not sort of levy an accusation of transphobia specifically for this, because it is just they totally redone all of the side content. And so then the other thing with it, to go even further, is that this game is one in a sort of line of games that have done some retcons of the Kiwami games are fairly controversial within the more hardcore Yakuza community. Like, I enjoy them. I'm totally fine with them. I also came in with them, so I don't have that perspective. If you're like a super old school Yakuza dude in the West who played like the PS2 game when it came out and all that shit, you will probably have a different perspective than me. But these games have always made big changes. They are total, complete remakes. They change huge amounts of the content. Some of that also includes some retcons. And there's been a series of some minor retcons where there are certain side characters and things like that who have died in previous games that they have basically brought back. Now, those have all been as like weird little side things. So it's like the bartender in Yakuza 7 is a character who died in Yakuza, I think it was Yakuza 3 originally he dies in, that they sort of brought him back as like a little Easter egg almost, but he's not a story character, he's just a bartender, and they never even like address it narratively. And they do the same thing in Yakuza 8. When you go to Hawaii, there's another bar in Hawaii with another bartender who is another character who died in Yakuza 3, who is mysteriously alive and is a bartender. And I'm totally fine with that because I think it's actually fucking hilarious, and I think it's like a very funny joke. The thing with this is that Yakuza 3 has a fan favorite character named Mine, who is the main antagonist of this game. This is the character that Dark Ties sort of extra mini expansion or whatever they put into this game. It is a playable campaign from the perspective of Mine, from what I understand being like a prequel. It was like leading into him becoming a Yakuza guy or whatever. Again, I haven't played it. But similar to Yakuza Kiwami 2, they added in an extra playable campaign where you play as Majima Goto, and it follows up from the Yakuza 0 story. It's the same kind of thing. And here, I know what they have done if they've added in a, like, extra cutscene. I don't know the context of where this cutscene falls. I don't know if it's like post-credits. I don't know if it's in the Dark Ties campaign. But I know that they've added a scene that shows that Mine survives the events of Yakuza 3, because he very definitively was dead at the end of Yakuza 3, and that he is still alive, and he's under the protection of the Daidoji, which is the sort of secret government organization from 6, 7, 8, the Gaiden games, where that's who Kiryu is with in the Gaiden games, after he fakes his death in Yakuza 6. And so it's another line in a thing that for some of the fans, they really do not, they're very upset about some of these retcons and bringing these certain characters back. And so that is another controversy, is people not being happy about this retcon of Mine being alive, whether or not they will use him in a future game, or that's just a like little fun thing. They're like, oh, he's alive now. Whatever. Like, I don't really give a shit about that stuff. But if you're seeing like a lot of the controversy, that's what it is I think this game is representative to a certain kind of Yakuza fan that is not a fan of the direction of the series for the past several games in some of those places, that this represents another entry in that. And so that, I think, kind of has boiled over and conflated with this much more serious issue of them casting this actor who has the sexual assault allegation. And then all this like extra like little fan quibbly stuff sort of has gotten like conflated with it as well. And so it has been a weird thing. The release of this game has been very strange. Again, I don't know if any of this is a similar controversy in the Japanese fan base at all. I have no idea. But it has been a weird journey for Yakuza Kiwami 3 to come to market.
Okay, I'm glad you explained all of that because that helps me parse what is kind of stupid fan grumbling versus what is actual controversy. Because there is a lot of I'll just say the stupid fan grumbling I've seen is people. This is a very Western perspective on this game of arguing that RGG Studio puts out too much stuff and it's too cheap and complaining about recycling assets and all that stuff, which is just like, guys, just, you know what? Some games don't take 10 years to make and cost $500 million. Fuck off. You know, you don't have to play it. That's kind of my view on that. But I understand the issues more. So we're more informed now.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I think it is just the thing that's complicated by the fact that there is a very legitimate controversy associated with it. And that it just feels like the fan stuff where like just Yakuza games, because it was such a sort of minor, weird niche thing for so long, has this very intense fan base at its core that can be incredibly aggressive, and I tend to not really agree with that specific slice of the fan base at all. And so it just makes this game, it's just kind of like has had a very strange story.
I also saw there seems to be a subset of the English fandom that really hates all the Daidoji stuff, and I don't know why. They're in all the Yakuza games I've played, and I like that stuff, and it's fine. It seems very fitting with all of the kind of soap opera-ness of Yakuza to me, but there seems to be people who hate any mention of the Daidoji, and that's why they didn't like this also about 3.
Yeah, and I don't understand that. I mean, yeah, because there's a lot of people who really hate Yakuza 6, and I don't know why. And I don't really understand why they really hate Yakuza 6, because I think that's a great game. I don't know, maybe they just aren't in touch with their inner grandfather, because that's the grandpa game where you're raising a baby for most of it. Because Kiryu has Haruka's infant son. I don't know. But yes, it is, it's a lot of the sort of weird internal fan arguments of the Yakuza franchise felt like they kind of exploded to the surface because of what has been going on with this game.
All right, well, moving on, let's talk about the Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, which happened on February 6th and had some interesting announcements that I wanted to break down. First off, we finally have our first major Xbox Game Studios announcements for the Switch 2, although they are all from Bethesda. We still have nothing from the rest of Xbox. But we do have 3 Bethesda announcements. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is coming to Switch 2 on May 12th, and it will be the full game on a cartridge, too, not a game key card. This is pretty rare for third-party publishers, so that's pretty cool. Fallout 4 Anniversary is also coming to Switch 2 on February 24th. That one, however, is for some reason digital only, with a physical release just being a code in a box, not even a game key card. So I guess Bethesda giveth and taketh, both the best option and the worst option for Switch 2 physical media with these 2 games. And then they also announced that Elder Scrolls Oblivion Remastered is coming later in 2026, but did not get a date. And from what we saw in the footage, these kind of seem to run the gamut. The Indiana Jones port looks great. It seems like it's 30 FPS instead of 60, but otherwise very consistent with how that game looks on other hardware. So basically what you would expect, and that's cool. Fallout 4 and Oblivion both look pretty messy on Switch from what we've seen, although Oblivion Remastered has been an absolute hot mess on everything it's released on, and Fallout 4 is Fallout 4. I don't even know what to make of that. Some of those Bethesda, mainline Bethesda games just don't run well anywhere, so who the hell knows?
Yeah, and it does feel like Bethesda has had a weird issue with the Switch 2, because they also had the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim special edition, or I don't remember
disaster,
where it had the most insane input lag you have ever seen. It's just fucking bonkers.
And they only quote unquote fixed that by, it also had a 30 FPS frame cap, which is bonkers for that game on Switch 2. Could easily run 60.
For Skyrim, a game that came out in 2011. That game is 15 years old. Yeah. It should not be running at 30 frames per second on the Switch 2, for God's sake.
But did you see how they fixed the input latency thing on that game, Sean?
No.
is they just lifted the frame cap, but it goes between like 30 and 40. So now you have to play that game, and that's in the range that VRR doesn't matter even if you had it on Switch. So it's just an unlocked 30 to 40, and it about cuts the input latency in half, which is still bad, just not as bad as it was. So like that game is still completely broken on Switch. Bethesda, and I should sort, those are Bethesda, the main studio. Indiana Jones is a Bethesda published thing, but that's Machine Games, and they have a really good track record on Switch. They've done really good work. So this is parsing those out. One of these seems good, one of these does not, but Bethesda has a messy track record. So
yes, Indiana Jones: The Great Circle is a very good game. People should play it. Fallout 4, less so. And I have not. And Oblivion was a great game when it came out. I have not played that remaster version because I just can't bring myself to pay a bunch of money for a game that runs that poorly. That's a remaster of a game that came out in 2006.
I really want to play Oblivion Remastered, but not only did it run poorly, they haven't supported it. They haven't done patches. They haven't gone in and fixed it in any meaningful way. And that's unacceptable. It is one thing to launch a game in poor condition and at least support it and get it better. I still don't think that's a great strategy, but, at least you make up for your mistakes. They've just left this kind of broken port out there, and that sucks, because I would like to go back and play Oblivion on modern hardware, but there you go. All right, we also got from Square Enix, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is coming on June 3rd. You might remember that Final Fantasy VII Remake just launched on Switch 2 in January, and is a very impressive port of that game. That's sort of halfway between PS4 and PS5 in terms of all the quality and visual settings. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, we don't quite know how it'll run when it comes. Rebirth was famously very poorly optimized on the PS5, and really only got fixed because of PSSR on the PS5 Pro. Although that does give me actually kind of some hope for this, because the Switch 2 can use DLSS, and the PS5 could not. So I think there's a possibility this could work well with that. But what I think is interesting is that they have shaved this game down. They've reduced some of the asset sizes and stuff. So this was a 150 gigabyte game on PS5. It will quote unquote only be 100 gigabytes on the Switch 2, but that will make it, by a pretty sizable margin, the biggest game to ever launch on Nintendo hardware.
Yeah, that's just such a comically huge number. I mean, obviously it is a big game that does have a lot of unique assets, but it is just sort of insane. It's even the fucking 150 gigabytes is even more crazy than PS5. They should just release a super rare novelty physical cart that's a special bespoke cart, because obviously 100 gigabytes is well outside the range of what these carts are designed to support.
64 is the maximum they have. Yeah.
So just you have a big fucked up one that has some and it just sticks out. It has a big bulbous thing on the end just to put the extra memory in, it's a weird exotic cart from the NES or Super Nintendo days. That's what they should do. That would make me happy.
It does speak to how weird and unoptimized that game is, though, because I just looked it up. Assassin's Creed Shadows on Switch 2 is 64 gigabytes. I'm sorry, guys. If you can get Assassin's Creed Shadows down to that, you can get Final Fantasy VII Rebirth down.
Which is a game that has way better looking textures than Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I mean, that's part of the thing with Rebirth, is that it's less that it's a poorly optimized game in terms of performance. It's more that it's just a visually... I don't want to just say ugly, because that's not fair, because there are elements of the game that do look great. But it's such a visually inconsistent game where there are certain places, like the character models and the cutscenes, that look fucking fantastic. And then you have these moments where you're in that open world and you're like, oh my God, this is just so bad looking, where the lighting is super flat and the textures just are incredibly muddy. And there's all this pop-in, which that's the one thing that the PS5 Pro version doesn't fix, is that it still has really bad pop-in super close to the camera. And so I'm curious, because I think you're right, that I think the DLSS will fix some of the image resolution issues, which was an additional problem on the PS5 version, was that it was just a very jagged looking game that the image was not processed well. But it has a lot of other visual kind of oddities on top of that. So I'm curious what the Switch 2's overall visual presentation will be, because it's just, especially compared to Remake, which did have its oddities of textures that didn't load on the PS4, but was generally a better, I think, looking game because it was more curated. I think Rebirth is just a game that overextended that studio in terms of the visual presentation and aesthetic, and I'm curious how the Switch 2 version, how it presents on that platform.
Yeah, that is definitely one where I am not going to buy that game because I don't like that game.
Yes,
but I am excited to get the demo because they put a demo out for Remake, and I did play that, and it's hugely impressive on Switch 2. Like, I was playing it handheld. It's amazing. That thing, it's better than the PS4 version. It's like on par with a lot of the PS5 settings, just at a lower frame rate. But like, I don't know about Rebirth. We'll have to see. Here's one I'm excited for, Sean. Digimon Story Time Stranger is getting its Nintendo Switch release, and it's not just a Switch 2 release. It is also getting a Switch 1 release on July 10th. I know that was a PS5 game. Did that have a PS4 release?
I do not think so.
Okay.
Here's the thing with Time Stranger. Great game. I love that game. It is a very low budget game for the scale of what it is. So it is not a particularly technically polished release. So this is actually something I'm very curious to see, especially the Switch 1, because that game does not run at anywhere near a locked 60 FPS on the PS5.
Yeah.
It has really weird performance hiccups. And so I'm very curious to see the technical presentation. Like, I'm sure it will be, because it's a fucking turn-based RPG. It never bothered me that it doesn't run that well. I think it will be perfectly fine on the Switch 2. I'm very curious what the Switch 1 version is.
That was going to be... Yeah. That was going to be my question.
That does not feel like it's designed to scale that low. I'm very curious.
That will be... Someone correct me if I'm wrong. The first major PS5 exclusive that will be getting a Switch 1 port. I don't think we've really seen that. I think we've seen PS4 or games with PS4 versions get Switch 1 ports, but not... Now, Digimon Story Time Stranger could probably run on the PS4. That is an issue more of like where the players are probably than anything, but that will be an interesting thing to see. But that is coming July 10th, and I'm excited for that because that's one I wanted to play on Switch, and there it is. It's coming. We also got a release date for a game I'm really excited about, which is The Adventures of Elliot, The Millennium Tales. This is the next game from the Octopath Traveler team. Octopath Traveler 0 just came out, but that is a sort of refined repackaging of the mobile game that had been made years ago. This is the next proper one after Octopath Traveler 2. It's sort of more of I saw people describe it as Chrono Trigger-esque, and that's wrong. It's more like classic Zelda. It's like over-the-top Zelda where you've got like your sword and you're moving. I think people thought of Chrono Trigger because of like the active time battle, but Chrono Trigger still is like menu-based and stuff, and that's not what this is. But I played the demo. It's fucking gorgeous. The story is great. The music, everything about it looks I really enjoyed the gameplay, so I'm really psyched for this because it looks super cool. And it is the first like fully next-gen HD 2D game because all of the existing Square HD 2D titles, the Octopath Travelers, the Dragon Quest remakes, all of those have had Switch 1 versions in addition to Switch 2. This is a Switch 2 exclusive. I mean, it'll be on PS5 also, I think, but you know what I mean. And I am very much looking forward to that. It's coming out June 18th, and this is one of the games I'm like most excited for this year. It looks really good.
Awesome, yes. Yeah, this game had not been all that much on my radar, but I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah. They also finally did something in this one that all the HD 2D games have desperately needed, which is they have hand-drawn character portraits on screen while the characters are talking. I think that is like a significant issue with like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy and some of these is that they will have long dialogue scenes that have great writing, great voice acting, super good, but all you have is like the pixel character in the middle and nothing else. And it can get a little tedious when you have nothing like to look at. And I think just having like a hand-drawn human face there does a huge amount. And they finally put that into Adventures of Elliot. So they've heard that feedback, it seems like.
Good, yeah. Because, I mean, even, that was even a thing that some old school pixel art games would do, is they have a very pixelated portrait, but still have a character portrait. And that always helps the, just the visual presentation of long dialogue scenes to give you something to look at.
Yeah, I don't need to be animated or anything. I just need a face. Yeah. It's just something. All right, and then the final thing that I wanted to mention from the Nintendo Direct was that Hamster Corporation, which is the company that has done the Arcade Archive series over the life of the Switch 1, and there's been a bunch of great stuff there. I mean, there's been arcade games, there's been Neo Geo stuff, a bunch of cool games from across arcade history. They're announcing two new series, an Arcade Archives 2 series that'll continue that on the Switch 2 and on more powerful hardware, including the game Rave Racer. But I think even more exciting is they've also expanded into doing what they're calling their Console Archive series, which will broaden the games they're releasing from arcade games to various home consoles, including the PlayStation 1. And there was an intimation in the announcement that we might also get PlayStation 2, Xbox games, that kind of stuff. The first entries they've already released are Ninja Gaiden 2 for the NES and Cool Borders from PlayStation 1. And I haven't played either of these yet, but I watched some videos about them, and I want to pick up that Cool Borders one, and I want to see what else they do, because it's a really good PS1 emulator. And, like, some PS1 games, you can present those in a very lazy way and they wind up looking very bad. I don't think, like, when you play the PS1 games that are out on PlayStation 5, I do not love the visual options that are there for those. This is a better version of that, and I would love to see more of this. So I'm glad that there's another company that's getting access to some games from, like, newer, 32-bit, 64-bit systems. That'll be cool to see.
Yes, and Hamster's just been hard at work. I mean, they've fucking been doing these things since at least the launch of the PS4. I know they had arcade archive games then. I don't know if it even predates the PS4, but it's just, they've been fucking, I mean, they must have released hundreds of games at this point through this product line over the past 13-something years. So I wonder if they're just like, fuck, we just can't make any, we're running out of arcade games, guys. Like, there's only so many we can do and get the licensing for. What else could we do? Fuck it. NES, PS1, let's go. It's whatever.
All right. So, Sean, now we have the Sony State of Play. You wrote up these notes, so I'm going to let you go ahead and go through these with us, because this was a big State of Play.
Yes, a lot of stuff in the State of Play. Only a little bit of first-party stuff, but a lot of big third-party and interesting third-party announcements. So the first one, and these are, I think, in alphabetical order, because I just went through the list. I did not watch this live. I watched the trailers and stuff afterwards. So that's how I'll present these more or less alphabetical order. So we start with a Castlevania game, because it is the 40th anniversary of the Castlevania. And Konami is a company that has decided over the past couple of years that it does want to actually continue to make video games. And so they're releasing some Castlevania stuff. They've kind of teased that there are going to be additional announcements later in the year, but they specifically announced the game Castlevania Belmont's Curse, which is a 2D style game, a proper quote-unquote Metroidvania game, in the style of a Symphony of the Night, clearly. But the thing that's very exciting is it's developed by the company Evil Empire, who are the makers of Dead Cell, which is obviously a very, very popular Metroidvania style, kind of flashy pixel art action game. This game is slated for this year, basically on everything. So it was at the Sony State of Play, but you can get it wherever you want. And the trailer looks fucking awesome. It seems like sort of implies in terms of the narrative that you're playing as Trevor Belmont's daughter, because Trevor Belmont is the main character from Castlevania 3. And I believe it also that's what the Netflix show was kind of around those characters. I never watched the Netflix show. I don't know if this will be tied into that at all, or if that's just sort of in parallel. So you are playing as a Lady Belmont who's going around fucking up Draculas and shit like that. And it just looks awesome. The visual presentation is exquisite. The music in the trailer is fantastic. Obviously, Castlevania has an incredible legacy of amazing music. And it has been a while since I've played a game in this style, and I was watching that trailer and was like, it might be time. Like, it might be time for me to be like, I'm going to play my one Metroidvania I play like every 4 years or something. Because it's a genre I enjoy, but it's a genre I also kind of get exhausted of after I do a game that's in that style. And I'm kind of like have to lay off of it for a bit. But I do really love Symphony of the Night, so I will probably check out this game when it comes out later this year.
I do not get exhausted of that kind of game. I'm psyched for this. I went on a whole Castlevania kick last year or the year before, because while Konami has not been making new games, they have been doing very good stewardship of their existing catalog. And so we had like the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, there's the Advanced Collection, the Dominus Collection. I haven't gotten to all of that stuff yet, but I did play through the original, Famicom 1, 2, 3. I played through 4 on Super Nintendo, the Genesis one, Bloodlines. So I did like all of the classic side-scrolling action Castlevanias, and those games fucking rock so hard. I love them. I had played Rondo of Blood before. That one's great. So I really love these games. And honestly, just like that tagline of a new Castlevania by the makers of Dead Cells, that's like a joke you would make on a forum of like a dream project, not something that would actually happen. So it's really cool this is happening, and I do hope we hear some other new Castlevania news, because there's like for just down to like one collection they could still get out there is like Symphony of the Night and Rondo of Blood are still locked to that one collection on PS4. There's more you could do with that. There's some of the like 3D Castlevanias that aren't necessarily great, but it would be cool to see like re-released for historical purposes. So there's other like archival stuff they could get going here too. So I do hope they do a lot of Castlevania stuff this year.
Yes. And I just love like the whole aesthetic of Castlevania, the look of it, the music. It's so fucking awesome. So I'm very excited for another big Castlevania game, because it's been a while since they did one of those.
And you know what? If they're doing more off of Castlevania 3, I understand that, because Castlevania 3, that game, oh my god, it's so good. That was the one that was like the biggest revelation for me when I played through them, was just how good Castlevania 3 is, with that like multi-character setup, all of that stuff. I understand why it continues to be a touchstone for this kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we actually have a pair of God of War announcements, one of which I realized I forgot to put in my notes. But on the Metroidvania note, there was a shadow drop of a game called God of War Sons of Sparta, which is a prequel to the God of War franchise, where you play as little boy Kratos, who's going around fighting ancient Greek monsters and what have you. And it released the day of the State of Play. And it seems to have gotten pretty good reception. I haven't really checked it out. It has a cool look, because it's sort of a like, it's pixel art. You know, the Castlevania Belmont's Curse is more like sort of 2D, like probably is not literally hand-drawn, but has a sort of hand-drawn aesthetic. Whereas this feels like if you took a like Mega Drive or Genesis game and like souped it the fuck up. It's got that kind of like very crisp looking sprite animation. It looked pretty cool. Maybe I'll have to check it out at some point. And it clearly is pulling stuff from the PSP God of War games, which is where you have this whole thing with Kratos had a brother, Deimos, and so there's clearly some of that in the narrative. But the other big announcement they had is that they are making a remake of what they're calling the God of War trilogy, or the Greek trilogy of God of War games. Now, what they did was they basically showed a logo, and then they had a video with T.C. Carson, who is just a fucking really cool guy. Like, he's so charismatic. Like, you should just watch the video, because he's just like, this dude's fucking so cool. God damn it. I wish I could be as cool as this man. He's so cool. But he is the OG voice of Kratos from the original games, who they recast when they went with the kind of Norse series of games, which made sense because they were kind of doing a different thing with the character. But it clearly, T.C. Carson is going to be involved with this project. I have to assume he's voicing Kratos again in the games, if they had him here in that announcement video. And so,
he's also in Sons of Sparta. He narrates the new game, Sons of Sparta. Yeah. So he is already back in the series.
Yes, and so that's cool, and I'm happy that they're doing that, because I think it would have sucked if you just sort of totally paved over his version of the character because you're doing a remake. It's like, no, his T.C. Carson's Kratos is a sort of different character, but he's another very iconic character of a more juvenile era for the franchise. But it would feel wrong to just sort of ignore it or get rid of it. Because it's Kratos was an iconic character well before the 2018 God of War game. And so, yes, this again is still light on details. All the video is an announcement that they are beginning development, is kind of how T.C. Carson phrases it. So clearly this is going to be a while off before we get more details. It's not even clear who is making it. Like, it's not clear, is Sony Santa Monica doing this in-house? Is maybe Bluepoint doing this? We know that from behind-the-scenes stuff that Bluepoint was doing some God of War project. At some point, that was going to be a multiplayer style thing, that project got internally canned at some point. And so we don't know what Bluepoint's been doing, and they haven't obviously done anything since Demon's Souls. So I would not be surprised if that was what they were doing.
Okay, future Jonathan cutting in here to interrupt what Sean was saying, because we recorded this on Sunday, and it is now Thursday, February 19th, as I'm talking to you, and this morning we got news, horrible news, that Sony is actually shuttering Bluepoint Studios. Bluepoint has nothing to do with the God of War remake trilogy as we had thought or hoped. Instead, they are shutting the entire studio down for the crime of having gone along with Sony's games as a service push and tried to spend many years making a God of War live service game that came to nothing, not because of anything they did, but because of everything Sony did. And so instead of allowing them to make anything new, they are done. Their last game ever will have been the Demon's Souls remake, which was a launch game for PS5 and is still maybe the best PS5 exclusive. This is terrible news. 70 people are being laid off by the Blue Point closure. It absolutely sucks. As Stephen Totillo on Blue Sky, obviously famous video game journalist, but I'm seeing this on Blue Sky, pointed out, Sony has done a bunch of studio acquisitions in the 2020s, and most of those have ended in either full closures or widespread layoffs. 2021, they acquired Nix's. That one is still ongoing. 2021, they acquired Firesprite, did a bunch of layoffs in 2024. 2021, they acquired Bluepoint, closed it now in 2026 without ever shipping a game. 2022, Valkyrie Entertainment, still around. 2022, Haven Studios, still around. 2022, Bungie, layoffs in 2024. New game Marathon coming soon, but again, has had huge layoffs. 2022, they acquired Neon Koi, which they then closed in 2024. And last year, 2023, they acquired Firewalk and then closed it in 2024 again. So Sony has been on an acquisition spree and then a closure spree in the midst of this generation where they are lucky if they get a single exclusive game out on PS5 a year, in a calendar year. I'm in a shitty mood about this. This sucks. I hate to have to cut back into the podcast with news like this, but I didn't just want to leave the part where we're talking about how much we love Bluepoint in the episode when we just learned that they are dead. I mean, not the people, but they are out of work, and that sucks. We loved their work. They were the best of the best at either, porting or remaking classic games, particularly from the Sony catalog. And, as you're going to hear me in the episode that as we originally recorded it, I'm about to go on a rant about how angry I am that they've never put God of War 1 and 2 out on the PS4 or the PS5 in any, real form. And the last time those games were released was for the PS3, which were Bluepoint remakes. And the fact that, Sony had Bluepoint fucking around with some live service bullshit for years on end and never, brought some of their amazing work like those God of War HD remakes to the PlayStation 5 to preserve their history as a studio, I just think says a lot about where the game industry is, but also I think how far Sony has fallen this generation. I don't know if Sean would agree with me on that. I am flying solo just to do this insert here, but it is a big piece of news, and I thought it was worth sharing before we put out this episode on Friday morning. So that's what's going on. If we mention the Bluepoint stuff again, we were recording this on Sunday, so this news hadn't broken yet, but that is what is going on. Back to you, Sean.
But the notion of a remake of those God of War games is very interesting because they're like games from a kind of bygone era. They are like orb games where there's a whole kind of style of character action game in the PS2 era where you run around and they're kind of big maps and they have the cameras pulled out really far and you hit dudes and you pick up orbs. Onimusha is coming back. They're making that new Onimusha game, and Onimusha was an orb game. They're just games where you picked up lots of orbs after hitting dudes a lot. That's kind of what these God of War games were, and they're fucking great games. And so I really am excited that they're bringing them back. But I'm curious to see what approach they make with the remakes. There's obviously a lot of content in that game that you'd have to really think hard about how you approach it because the tone of that game is very trying to hit a certain juvenile adolescent male audience. You have the weird optional sex mini games that are things you have to go find, and there's the extreme violence that Kratos commits, that some of that is really essential for the story, and especially for the story that then connects to the Norse games. But I think you have to think about the ways in which you present that violence, which I think would have to be in a different context revisiting those games now versus the kind of Mountain Dew, Doritos, X Games fucking shit that was what the God of War games originally were, while not getting rid of that tone entirely. Because there is a certain thing of the blood-addled, sex-crazed fucking take on Greek mythology that does have a legitimate connection to Greek mythology, that has some of that kind of element to it. So I do think that there is a fine point you can land on that preserves some of the essence of that tone and the ways in which it did really work well for the franchise, while not making people relapse to how awful certain things were in the mid 2000s. Because if you haven't consumed a lot of media from the early to mid 2000s recently, you probably don't realize how fucked up some of that shit was. That was just totally like kind of normal commonplace in a lot of the media at the time. And so I think it's an interesting project to try to remake those games. I'm very, very curious to see what they do with it.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not pissed off by this announcement because it's potentially you could do something fun with this. Here's what pisses me off. God of War 1 and 2 are still not playable on PS5.
Yes.
This is fucking, or PS4. This is fucking ridiculous that they have been continuing to do stuff with this franchise, sell stuff based on this franchise, and just completely abandon the history of this franchise. You can't even play 1 and 2 on the super expensive PS Plus line anymore. I just looked it up, and they're not even in the Classics catalog. So there is no way on PS4 or 5 to play God of War 1 or 2. You can play 3 because it got a PS4 remaster. But other than that, and that's to say nothing of the PSP games or Ascension or any of those others that they did. They're just completely gone. And, a remake, that could be fun. It's also years off at this point. It's a lot of developer resources. When you could just put out a port of the PS2 games, the PS2 games can run on PS5. There's an emulator that does it. There's some of those are already out. They could just do that, and we could have those games, and then you could have them as a piece of history, and we could judge what they were in their moment versus what they could be now, and we could just talk about that. And it's my same frustration also with, over on Nintendo, Metroid Prime 2 and 3 still have no release whatsoever on Nintendo Switch. And that clearly hurt them on Metroid Prime 4. The fact that that game didn't sell all that great yet, part of that has to be that those games have been missing in action on Nintendo hardware since the Wii. That is a tough thing to get over. God of War has had an easier time of it because they restarted the series with God of War 2018. But it does piss me off when Sony just completely ignores their history like this. And a remake is not the same as having the original accessible. It would take very little man effort compared to a remake to just port these games, and you could do that a lot simpler. And there's a lot of games in Sony's catalog. The entire history of Ratchet and Clank is another one that's like this for me, where the Metroid Prime example annoys me, but for the most part, Nintendo is pretty good about having their history on their systems. Sony is not, and that still annoys the crap out of me. And this announcement just kind of got me annoyed about that all over again, that if you want to play Sony's history, the best system to own is the PS3, which launched in 2006, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, absolutely, I agree with that it would be best. And I feel this about all remakes, that anything that is you're doing a complete remake of it. This is slightly aside from just these games should be available anyways, but particularly when you're doing a full top to bottom remake that is not just a simple we're trying to up-res the game or whatever, you should have a emulated version as close as possible to the original also available, and have it available, I think, for no additional charge within the remake. It should just be the standard practice so that you can always access what that original game is, especially because sometimes remakes change things that you don't like or you don't agree with or you don't think is as good as how the original approached that thing. And so not being able to play that original game in an easy format on the same device you're playing this remake fucking sucks. So I absolutely agree that they should just have simple re-releases of God of War 1, 2 in their classics library or whatever.
There is plenty of precedent for this. Capcom has been really good about keeping the original versions of Resident Evil out there in addition to the remakes. In fact, they recently, I just discovered this a month or two ago, they took the PS1 versions of Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 off of the PS Plus Classics catalog, and now you can just buy them as standalone apps on PS5, which is, and if you owned them on the PS3 or Vita, they just give them to you. So one day I just discovered I had in my library the PS1 versions of Resident Evil Director's Cut 2 and 3, and they're there alongside the remakes. A+, that is what we want. That is good.
Yes.
And that should be the standard that everyone follows, especially if you are the maker of the console. This should not be this hard.
Absolutely. All that being said, I do think, as someone who has played these games, I do think that there is, like, I think these are interesting games to approach from a remake perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something very interesting about, who knows the approach they make. But I think that there's, like, they're very imperfect games, and they're ones that I think there's, like, an interesting way to kind of refine some of what those games were going for, that they were not always very successful at. And I think that I think that there are big elements of those games that'd be extremely unpalatable to people, that were unpalatable to me when I went back to them, and I really enjoyed those games, but I had to kind of go through some shit, or like go past some shit in order to like really get to the stuff that was really great about them. And so I do think that there is particularly from like a narrative framing, character writing perspective, that there is a there, but those games were just not always particularly good at getting it, and they often got into their own way. Especially, honestly, actually, God of War 3 is one of the biggest offenders in that. God of War 1 and 3 both had big problems with like getting out of their own way and like actually exploring the interesting story that they had. And then I also think there's an interesting prospect of revisiting this kind of third-person character action game that people just don't make games like this anymore. And it was just like everything. It was the game that all PS2 games is what God of War is. It's just there was that certain kind of 3D character action game of the early to mid 2000s that just kind of went away, because it's not Devil May Cry and it's not Bayonetta. Like, it's not that kind of character action game. It's a different sort of beast. And I think, what I really hope they don't do is that they don't just make it play like the Norse games. Like, it should still play generally like those PS2 games, but find a way to like do other things and flesh out that gameplay style again. I think there's just sort of like a lot of interesting meat of all the things to do remakes of. I think the old God of War games are some of the most interesting ones to do this for. And so I wish that the classic games were just easily available, without having to resort to emulation or having an old console or whatever. But I also am very interested to see what they do with a remake of these games.
Yeah, my annoyance is just that remakes should be a value add, not a replacement, and I don't like when they are treated as a replacement. So, there we go.
I very much agree. All right, next up we've got a free update to Ghost of Yotei with Ghost of Yotei Legends. This is the same thing they did with Ghost of Tsushima, where they created this sort of like free co-op multiplayer game, basically, that's almost like its own game on top of the original, where you kind of pick one of 4 different classes to play with your friends and go run around in a kind of like mythological version of the world of the Ghost games, which obviously have like little types of like sort of supernatural hints around the edges of things in the main games, but otherwise are very much grounded in reality. And the Legends games are like weird monsters and yokai and stuff like that. I didn't really play much of Ghost of Tsushima Legends other than just sort of seeing what it was. I'll probably do the same with Ghost of Yotei, and I just don't play multiplayer games almost at all anymore. But it is a totally free edition at no additional cost. It'll be fully released sometime later this year. And so if you really enjoyed Ghost of Tsushima Legends, which I know there are some really big fans of that mode, I'm sure you'll be very happy with Ghost of Yotei Legends, because all the improvements they've made to the combat and stuff and the different weapons, all of that was clearly on display in the trailer, and it looked pretty cool. Next up, we've got an untitled John Wick game. I assume it's going to be called John Wick. I don't know. John Wick, the video game, where they had a trailer that it was sort of hard to parse how much of it was just pre-rendered and how much of it seemed like there's some stuff that looked like alpha kind of gameplay. But there
was gameplay at the very end. The rest of it was clearly cutscene stuff, like CGI.
Yes. Yeah, so it's developed by Saber Interactive, which is the announcement you're like, oh, Saber's has a very rough track record. But
what else have they done recently that we would know?
I think they're like in with the like KOTOR remake that did not ever or see the light of day. It's a good question of what are some of the other
I'm looking
games.
It up right now. Here, you keep talking and I'll take a look at it.
Yeah. The thing with this announcement is that John Wick is a movie property that is like made to have been turned into a video game. Like there would have been, if John Wick had come out in the year 2005, there would have been 10 John Wick video games released by the year 2008, because there had been a GBA John Wick game and John Wick on the Nintendo DS, and, John Wick's Continental Adventures released for Nokia phones. It's such a movie property designed to be a video game. But the licensed video game died like 10 years ago. And so there has been no John Wick games other than like DLC for Payday or whatever, where you can look like Keanu Reeves. And so I'm very interested in the idea of a John Wick game. And it kind of, the little bit you get at the end of the trailer where you see some more gameplay sort of reminded me of the game Sifu, which is a game I very much enjoyed and would be, if I were making a John Wick game, especially one that's at like a more reasonable budget level and not trying to be some AAA monster. Sifu is kind of the model of a game I would look at for that style of combat. But I think this is like a big open question mark of like, how good will this game actually be? It's clearly very early in development. It is not a developer that has like the most like, I'm automatically going to pick this game kind of track record. But I would just like to live in a world that has like a really good fucking John Wick game that you could go play. It just feels like a thing that should exist. So yeah.
Yeah, I was a little mixed on that trailer. I think like it sort of gets the John Wick action, but I felt in a very like kind of surfacey level where I didn't fully buy it. The Keanu Reeves model at the end looks off in a way that freaked me out. I don't know. It's Saber Interactive I'm looking through. They honestly have not published any real new games in a long time. Most of what they publish is remasters and stuff, like the Tomb Raider remasters from Aspyr, stuff like that. I think the biggest recent game that I know of that is under their no, this isn't even them. No, this was a port. They did like the port of Kingdom Come Deliverance to Switch.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's stuff like that. So like they haven't really done any new games in a long time. So we'll see. But yeah, I would like a John Wick game. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like Saber is one of those studios that it feels like has been like trying to get like bigger projects for a while, but is stuck in this kind of like port space. And yeah, so it's a thing where it's like the trailer is not one that I think just automatically gives you a huge amount of confidence in the game, and nor does the pick of developer. But it's just like, it just feels like a John Wick action game. It's just a thing that should have existed for fucking ever ago. Like, it's crazy that it hasn't. I mean, I know there was like, I think it was a mobile game, John Wick Hex. Like, there have been some little small things, but like, it just feels weird that you can't boot up your console and just play a fucking John Wick game. Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Moving on with other announcements, we've got Marvel Tokone Fighting Souls, the Marvel fighting game, which was announced a bit ago, that is co-developed with Sony and Arc System Works. It got a release date here for August 6th. So it should be coming out later this year. And there's just like a slate of other announcements that came with it. They announced some new characters, including Wolverine, which, it's nice for them to actually show him. But
Wolverine in the Marvel? What?
Yeah. I think we all just assumed Wolverine would be in it. I mean, honestly, Wolverine feels like a character that should have just been in the original trailer in the way that they put Spider-Man there. Because it's like, of fucking course Wolverine's in it. Like, if there's two characters that are going to be in a Marvel fighting game, it's Spider-Man and Wolverine. You can't make one that doesn't have those two guys in it. And so the Wolverine's there. But then they did show two more obscure X-Men related characters, Magic, who I know has been getting more exposure because she's in the Marvel Rivals game. And then also Danger, a character I did not know existed, but apparently at some point in X-Men comics, the Danger Room, which is the like AI-controlled big room that is like their holodeck, basically, that the X-Men train in, it got turned into a like sentient robot lady. And so that's another character. And so their X-Men team in the game is Storm, Wolverine, Magic, and Danger. And they kind of gave you more hints about the story, that there's some sort of crisis occurs, and clearly the main X-Men team is basically out of action because of this big crisis. And so this is this kind of ragtag band of two classic old school X-Men, Storm and Wolverine, and these two kind of newer, more obscure ones, Magic and Danger. And that they have to team up to face the threat, implying, I'm assuming, that everybody will be part of some kind of team of four, narratively speaking. And so, who knows if that will be true for every character, but it seems like what they're kind of hinting at with this setup. It seems like the one thing they're doing with the story mode will have, they were like talking about like manga panels that come alive, and so it sounds like they'll be kind of like very nicely drawn cutscenes that are more in that kind of living comic book space. They didn't show them, they just kind of talked about it. And so it sounds like they're kind of leaning into having some big single player content. I'm hoping this game is good, and I hope this game has a lot of big single player stuff, because I'd be very interested in playing a Marvel fighting game developed by Arc System Works. But obviously, as someone who's not that good at fighting games, I would want a lot of good single player content to dig my teeth into, because I'm not going to play this game online all that much.
Yeah, but it looks great. I mean, it's
Yes.
Arc System Works doesn't miss. This looks awesome. It's their next big thing after Dragon Ball FighterZ. I'm excited just for all of that, you know?
Yes. And it was nice that if you're someone who plays the English dub, they did show that Steve Bloom is playing Wolverine in the English dub, which if you're going to do English Wolverine, it should be him. He's been Wolverine in a bunch of stuff. I'll obviously be playing in the Japanese dub because, as we already all know, ever since hearing the first word in the first trailer for this game, that Storm in the Japanese dub is voiced by Satoshi Miyuki. So I'm like, well, I mean, there's not a fucking question of which language option I'm going to be using. But if you're a heathen, you can enjoy Steve Bloom's performance of Wolverine.
Well, excellent.
All right. Next up, and probably the most exciting announcement particularly for a certain section of the audience, Metal Gear Solid Collection 2 has been announced, following on from obviously Collection 1, which came out relatively recently, which had Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. But the Collection 2 has Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots, but it also has the best Metal Gear Solid game ever, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and then it does also have the Game Boy Color game Metal Gear Ghost Babel, and that will be releasing August 27th. Now, this is obviously momentous news because Peace Walker is a great fucking game, and everyone should play it. But then also, Metal Gear Solid 4, the movie / video game, has been trapped in the badlands of the PlayStation 3 since it came out. There were like rampant rumors in those heady days that it was going to be ported to Xbox 360, and that never happened. There have been rumors forever that Metal Gear Solid 4 is going to be ported to this, that, or the other thing, and it has never come to fruition. It's certainly one of the most like notable games to be stuck on one console to never have been re-released. And finally, it will be released for everyone to realize that you could just watch it on YouTube.
This is the thing. Like, look, I'm happy this is happening. I'm glad.
It should happen. It should have happened a long fucking time ago.
Irrespective of our individual thoughts on individual games in the series, Metal Gear Solid is an important piece of video game history, and the games should be, readily accessible in their original forms, so I'm glad that these collections exist. I'm very glad these collections exist. And actually, as a part of this, they also did a final update for the first collection that fixed a bunch of issues with it. So, for instance, the first game, the PS1 game, now has, like, resolution boost modes, which is good because the original didn't have some of those options. And they fixed it on Nintendo Switch, at least on Switch 2. The original Switch version of Metal Gear Solid Collection 1 was only playable in 30 FPS, and these are games that on PS2 were 60 FPS. Completely inexplicable, but they finally fixed that, at least on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I'm actually just picked up Collection 1 because of that, because I've wanted to get that for a while, but I wanted them to fix it first, so they did. So I'm glad this is coming out. I'm glad Peace Walker is getting its day in the sun again, because yes, it rocks. The thing about Guns of the Patriots, though, is that, like honestly, do you remember, Sean, the different Sonic collections they had on, like, PS2 and GameCube back in the day? Mm-hmm. And they had one called, I think it's Sonic Gems Collection, that is Sonic CD, and then it is Sonic, like, Racer and Sonic the Fighters. I think this is kind of like that, where you've got one standout all-time great game in the series, which would be Peace Walker, and then you've got one that's kind of crap. And that's kind of my opinion of Metal Gear Solid 4. I know it has its fans. I think Metal Gear Solid 4 is a pretty bad game. One, it's not really a game. It's got a little bit of gameplay at the beginning, and then almost none for the rest of the game. It is mostly a series of cutscenes. I think it is absolute peak of Kojima being completely incomprehensible as a storyteller, and completely muddled in what he wants to do. It has some moments that are very memorable and touching, and some that many that fall flat. I think a lot of you have forgotten all of the Otacon stuff in that game and how fucking crazy that goes. So I don't really think it's a good game. I think a lot of people are going to get that and be like, "Oh, this is a collection with one game I want to play and one I don't really, because you can't play it. It's just a movie." So we'll see how people think about that. But I am glad it is being freed from the PS3 because, as time passes, that gets harder and harder to play, especially because the PS3 is such a hard system to emulate. So I'm glad it will be out there for people, but you will learn that there isn't a huge difference between playing Metal Gear Solid 4 and watching it on YouTube. So there you go.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe Metal Gear Ghost Babel is like an absolute all-time, maybe it's the greatest video game ever released and just nobody knows, because it's one, as far as I know, that game is just straight up non-canonical. I don't think Kojima was involved in it. So I'm actually kind of impressed that they are releasing it at all, because it just feels like one of those things that the franchise would sort of forget. But, you know, I've never met anyone who's played Metal Gear Ghost Babel. I only sort of vaguely am aware of the game's existence in my brief, like, I should know what Metal Gear Solid is phase, and when I played through those original games. But I obviously didn't play that one, so...
Okay, so I'm seeing now, so Metal Gear Ghost Babel is the game that was outside of Japan just sold as Metal Gear Solid for Game Boy Color. So it's the one, yes. It looks like it would be, and even the cover art is basically taken from the PS1 game, so it looks like it should be a port of the PS1 game to Game Boy Color, whatever the fuck that would mean. I understand that's impossible, but like... It's not. It is a completely different, as you say, non-canonical game set after It's a alternate sequel to the original Metal Gear, the PC Engine Metal Gear. That sounds fascinating. I'm curious about it.
Yeah, it is just very funny how, like, I don't think I saw anyone mention that it was in when I saw, like, the online buzz. There's a lot of people being like, oh my god, Metal Gear Solid 4, and then there's some, you know, people who carry the banner like me, they're like, yeah, but Peace Walk is the actual one you want to play. I didn't see anyone mention Ghost Babel. It wasn't until I pulled up the press release thing when I was making this list for the disc, like, oh, that's in it too. And it does just sort of feel like, I think there's some sort of licensing thing that's preventing them from getting the Metal Gear Acid games on there, the PSP games that I know people fucking love. And so it does feel like they sort of were desperate to find what's another thing we could put in this package, and they ended up with this Game Boy Color game.
Well, there you go.
There we go. But we have a couple of other announcements. We've got Star Wars Galactic Racer was announced here, which is a thing that normally, if you just told me Star Wars Galactic Racer, I would just kind of roll my eyes and be like, that game's probably terrible. But watching the trailer, I was like, you know what? I'm in for it. I'm in for it. It is like a very arcadey looking racing game, obviously set in the world of Star Wars, and you've got pod racers and speeder bikes and all that kind of shit. But it's got a real kind of like, you know, old school Burnout kind of vibe where it doesn't, you know, maybe it will be open world. The trailer doesn't make it look like it's a, you know, fancy modern open world style racing game. It looks like it's like you're fucking racing and you're running into dudes and they're fucking blowing up and shit. You know, it's like what racing games used to be when you went to the arcade and you played like fucking Hydro Thunder or some shit and everything's exploding everywhere. Everybody's racing explodes. The track is exploding. It's just, as long as you put explosions in it, you know, the people who don't give a fuck about racing all that much will have a fun time. And as someone who's, you know, enjoys a racing game every now and then, but is not like super into them, I just think they desperately need lots more explosions, and this game had a lot of them. The trailer implied that there's also going to be some kind of story mode, you know, which seems like there'll be some, you know, some beefier single player content than just only racing, which is good because I think it'd be hard to sell a racing game that doesn't have another hook on it outside of just like racing matches, you know, doesn't have an open world or anything like that. So hopefully it's good. It said it would come out later this year. And we're just, you know, there's just not a large amount of these games anymore. It used to be you had just like, you drowned in arcade racing games and they just came out all the time. The way that there used to just be 1,000 sports games and 5 different studios were making 3 different fucking football games a piece at the same time. And then now it's only Madden is the only thing that makes football games. It's kind of like that with racing games. And it's like either you're Forza Horizon or you're a pervert who has like a wheel and a fucking VR headset and all the shit and you're online. Or I guess maybe you're doing Gran Turismo. And like, if you're not interested in one of those 3 flavors of racing game, you're shit out of luck. And as the person who likes Burnout, I'm shit out of luck. And so maybe will be something for me.
I still think you should give Forza Horizon. Forza Horizon is what you want. I
know. I tried Forza Horizon 4 and 5 on Game Pass, and I was not into it. I thought they're kind of boring.
That's a you problem, man.
Your cars, none of the cars blow up. They just drive. What's the point of that? They should be exploding. Everyone knows this.
Forza Horizon 6 that's coming out this year is set in Japan, and you can drive around the Gundam statue. So we are obligated to do a Weekly Suit Gundam episode about that game.
But if you can you go off a ramp and like hit the middle of it, and then it fucking shoots all the other cars with a beam rifle?
I don't know.
Okay, well then if it doesn't do that, then I don't know what the fuck is the point.
All right. Anything else from the Sony State of Play, Sean?
Yes, a couple of other things. Just like these are games that were already announced. I just want to shout out. I enjoyed the trailers for 007. First Light had a cool trailer. Control Resonant, the sequel to Control, had another that trailer was fucking awesome. Where it's just like you got to see the just like fucked up weird. Just New York has been totally fucked over. And it's all distorted, and there's almost like, it's like a weird Gravity Rush vibe where the gravity gets all crazy and you're like walking on the fucking walls of the buildings and shit. It's pretty cool. And then probably what I think is the thing I'm actually most excited about from this State of Play is Saros, the sequel to Returnal, which obviously had been previously announced. I think this is the first time we've seen it since the announcement trailer. And that is, for me, a kind of front runner for probably Game of the Year of all the things I've seen, other than, who knows, Grand Theft Auto 6, whatever, put that aside. Anything other than that, if GTA 6 comes out this year, Saros is like the thing. Returnal was so good. It seems like they're doing some pretty interesting stuff with making it a bit more accessible, with having you retain more upgrades across playthroughs and stuff like that, making it a little bit less harsh of a roguelike. But also they did show other things that they're doing to tweak and turn up the difficulty in other areas. Because I think the problem with Returnal for some people, I really loved that game. I did not personally have an issue with the difficulty stuff, but I definitely understood why some people did, because I do think it's got a pretty harsh, like, in kind of inconsistent difficulty, in that like it's got a couple of really big jumps and difficulty spikes in the game that I think if you're not like really in it for that kind of stuff, is like there are a bunch of places that feel like it's easy to get kind of shoved out of the game because it gets very, very hard all of a sudden. And until you kind of get a certain level of mastery on the game, you kind of see how those things are not nearly as hard as they seem upon first encountering them, but it takes some kind of endurance to deal with it. And so I think that game could be kind of harsh to certain players. And it seems like Saros, it looks like they've taken some of that criticism to heart with some of the things they showed off, because it's very much like a 3-4 minute gameplay kind of trailer with what the game director talking through some choices. And it looked like they kind of built more systems to make it so that players would be more kind of invited in and make it easier for them to kind of wrap their head around some of the more complicated concepts of progression, while also building other areas for more, returning players or players in for that more kind of hardcore experience to build in greater challenges in other places. So it just looks like a game that I think is going to be a really, really great sequel to what was already just an absolute masterpiece game. I think Returnal is so fucking good. And I really hope that Saros is a game that is just as good as Returnal, but also one that is easier for more people to kind of find what is really special about it.
Returnal, still one of those PS5 exclusives I haven't played that I really need to. I need to get on that.
Yeah, it is very good, and yeah, Saros is just like a front runner for me for this year. And then I noticed Jonathan, you put something on this list that I did not originally include.
Yeah, so they also showed off at the State of Play and then shadow dropped the Rayman 30th Anniversary Edition. This is a digital Eclipse package, published by Ubisoft, that is the original PlayStation 1 Rayman game, and I've never played that game, so I was excited to hear this, because it seems like something that's always should have been something I would have enjoyed and would be in my wheelhouse, that kind of like cartoony platformer, and it is a digital Eclipse package. So it's on PS5, it's also on Xbox and Nintendo Switch 2 and all of that stuff, so you can go, and Nintendo Switch 1, you can get it wherever you want. So I did pick it up. It's a $20 release, and it is your typical gourmet meal version of game history that Digital Eclipse gives you, because it has a full, really cool port of the original PS1 version of Rayman that is the definitive version, but it also has a port of the Atari Jaguar port, which was, they had to make the game for a cartridge-based system instead of disc, so it has to cut and redo some stuff, so it's a slightly different version of the game. Then they also have the Game Boy Color Rayman game and the Game Boy Advance Rayman game, which are not exact remakes, obviously, because of the system, but they are there. And it even has the single-level Super NES demo of Rayman as a prototype on there. Within all of that, you've got your CRT filters, your screen borders, turn them on or off, all of that kind of good stuff that you want from this kind of retro package. And then your normal Digital Eclipse stuff as well, it's got an hour-long documentary, it's got interviews with the developers, it's got concept art. It it is like the most complete history version of this that you could ask for. It's what we've come to expect from Digital Eclipse, but, you know, I never want to downplay the truly, like, amazing work that they do, like, setting the bar for everyone else on this kind of game preservation package. And I haven't gotten super deep into it yet. I'm playing some other stuff as well right now. But, like, clearly the best way if you want to go play original Rayman, this is awesome. I'm really glad it exists. Hopefully they do this kind of thing for Rayman 2 as well, which I know is like an all-time great sequel that people love and has had lots of versions that they could go into. Rayman 2 has a separate Nintendo DS and Nintendo 3DS remakes if they want to go down that fucking rabbit hole. There's a lot that they could do with that. So I'm glad whenever Digital Eclipse does one of these, and I always want to shout them out because, you know, we were talking earlier about game preservation with God of War and that kind of stuff, and these guys set the bar for what this should be, and I love seeing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Rayman is a game that I remember renting. Not me renting. I was at my neighbor's house who rented it, and kind of playing it through with them. And so I do have like a weird nostalgia for Rayman 1 and just the, like, it's a very European feeling game. You know, I think it's one of the earliest games I remember playing being like, this just something's odd, like something's a little bit off, because it's like you're used to games that are American and you're used to games which are Japanese when you're growing up, or at least growing up in America. And then you play this like this. There's something different. And it wasn't until I was much older than like this game's European as fuck. It's got just a different sensibility. But that's very cool. And yes, it's Rayman's a cool character. You know, and Ubisoft is the company that's in dire straits and has been for a while. And so it's been a while since Rayman. I guess Rayman Legends would have been the last one, and that was a long time ago. So it's been a while since Rayman had his due. So it's nice to have that original game out here in good fashion.
Rayman 1 was an Ubisoft Montpellier production in Castellane-la-Luz, France. And I'm sure I said every single one of those words wrong, but the French will be fine if I'm mispronouncing.
Yes.
So there we go. Very, very French game. All right. I think that wraps up for the news, Sean. You want to get into the stuff? Yeah,
let's talk about some stuff.
So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about your conference? Do you want to do some media stuff? How do you want to break things up here for us, Sean?
Let me just go through some of the stuff with the conference in my trip. I don't know how much there's to talk about because I don't know how interested the audience is in getting to the nitty-gritty details of this. I mean, basically what the conference is it is about technology in education, and it is designed to be attended by a wide variety of different academic and educational professionals, whether you're in the administration side of things or the teaching side.
Is this the kind of thing where like your employer sent you to this?
Yes.
Or you? Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So it was basically one teacher, more or less from each of the major departments. It was me, a social studies teacher, someone who teaches biology, and the instructional coach for math. All went. And so yes, it was very much it is a big conference. It's one of like the biggest educational conferences held in Texas for K through 12 education. And it was actually offered for me to go last year when it was still in Austin. And I ended up turning it down mostly because I was still teaching both regular English and the English as a second language class. And I just couldn't envision being away from that for a week. And those ESL kids, I couldn't picture a sub being in that class for a whole week. And I was like, I just can't deal with that stress. But I went this year, partially because, I was interested in going, but also a lot of things have happened that have ended up where it seems like a very distinct possibility that I might end up becoming the department lead for the English team. There's a much bigger conversation to have that happen that I can't really have on the podcast. But it meant that I came into this both as being like, I'm looking at this as an English teacher, looking at what can I bring into the classroom, but also very explicitly I'm there as the person who's currently the lead of the department, or who was currently the lead of the department, decided to step down from that role because of lots of bullshit that was going on. And I am probably going to be the person that is going to be asked to replace them. And so I'm looking at it from that perspective as well, as somebody who needs to bring this stuff to a team of other teachers and find what are like tools and things we can use as a department and broadly as a school to enhance education. Now,
Congratulations, if that's how you feel. I don't know if you feel congratulations about
it.
I
have complicated feelings.
Okay, that's what I assumed.
Yes. And again, and I don't know. I don't know if that will actually happen or not. I've not been. It all started going down a little bit before I went for this conference, and that has been too busy for people to have conversations about it since. But anyways, the conference itself, as you can probably make an educated guess, Jonathan, if I tell you that there is a conference about technology and education in the year 2026, what do you think is going to be the most prominent topic at that conference?
My shocking and sudden suicide in the lobby when I see all the AI stuff that just sours it for everyone else. That's probably it, right?
Yeah, it's just we come in because the conference was Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It was a 5-day conference, very long. Then I ended up staying an extra day just so I could go see the Alamo and stuff like that. And yeah, so if you had shown up Friday night and then we come in the morning and then there's just this mysterious body hanging from the rafters of the conference hall, it's just like, oh, well, shit. I guess we gotta shut it down. That'd be a great premise for like an episode of a cop show or something. It's like, I have to figure out what has happened here. Was he murdered? Is it a political statement? But
it was ChatGPT.
Yes, it's ChatGPT the whole time. There's a killer lurking within ChatGPT. We got to put on our cyber helmet and go into cyberspace. But you surmised correctly. It was a lot of AI stuff, and it was pretty interesting because it was a wide array of like, having very big companies there, like Google, like spokespeople for Google and stuff like that. And for Canvas LMS, which is what our campus uses. And lots of campuses use Canvas as their learning management system.
Mine does too. Yay.
Yes. And we all have complicated feelings about Canvas. There's good things and bad things. So you have these very big companies there that are giving talks and demonstrations and stuff like that of their tools and technology. And then also lots of things that are like teachers, either former teachers who have kind of like shifted their career into more or less being a professional conference talk person. Like that's always fun to go to a conference and be like, oh, this dude has his own like website he's made that has like a calendar going back like 8 years with all the conferences he's been to, that each one has 10 links to 10 different slideshows. And it's like, this is just like this guy's career at this point, is going to these conferences and giving these kinds of talks. And then you also have stuff that's like, literally, this is a current active teacher or instructional coach or librarian or someone at a campus who is here giving a talk about things they're actively using that will like go back and teach on the Friday after the conference and probably be using one of these tools. So it was a very wide variety of different kinds of people there giving different kinds of presentations. And again, a lot of it was AI focused. And AI in K through 12 education is like a very strange beast. Like I very much feel that once you get past K through 12, like once you're in your territory, Jonathan, you're at the college level, AI really has no place being there. It can't do anything at that level whatsoever that is useful. And anything that you think is useful is because like people are not producing work that is of sufficient intellectual rigor, that it's just like not there. When you're at younger ages, I do think there are some pretty interesting things that AI can do. And you have to sort of, one thing I had to do there is sort of like, again, as someone who has to represent the school and bring things back, and there's a certain expectation from the administration on like what I'm getting from this, of like having to put aside the more moral qualms about copyright and intellectual property theft and the, environmental impact, and look at these things as educational tools that are going to be used by this campus regardless of my moral problems with them. And there are some interesting applications for AI at a certain level where you're really working with students whose like content they're dealing with is at a low enough level and like a basic enough level that AI can actually give feedback that feels somewhat reasonable. Or you can have an activity using AI that feels reasonable because you're not going enough into detail that you're really at risk of it really doing much of a hallucination, because it's all fairly surface level. Like, for instance, there is an interesting tool you can use in Magic School, which is one of the main sort of specific K through 12 education focused AI platforms, where you can design a chatbot where you basically feed the chatbot specific information, like here's articles and stuff on this topic. and then give it instructions on here is what I want you to do. So one that I made for the unit we're doing on argument that involves reading the story of the 1972 Andes disaster, where this airplane of rugby players crashed in the Andes Mountains, and it's this survival story of how they had to survive for about 72 days. Some of them ended up resorting to cannibalism, of cannibalizing some of the people who died in the plane crash in order to survive. And so the question we're writing about was that a moral action? Was it ethical to eat the deceased remains of these people in order to survive, or was that an unethical thing to do? And so the chatbot was like, I programmed it from the perspective of one of the survivors, feeding it information about this historical event and the article we read and some additional information, and had them ask questions, and gave them a list of like, here are recommended questions to ask. And I had to program it to not give certain responses. And that was like a pretty interesting activity that I think actually worked well, because when you constrain this kind of AI and give a really focused use case, and also especially prompting students to give very specific kinds of inputs so you can kind of anticipate certain kinds of outputs that will be useful. There are some interesting things that AI can do, but it's like, man, you gotta really be searching through the shit to find the couple of little nuggets there that you can actually bring back. And again, they're kinds of activities that I think once you're at the college level, you're not getting any information from that is like useful to a certain level of productive thinking. But like for ninth graders, like I did find a couple of things like that was using AI that was kind of interesting. But man, I went to a lot of talks and be like, this is some bullshit you're trying to sell me. And it's like, it's mostly the things that are like, here is a teacher who has used this tool, who has found a way to use this tool in an actual classroom and is giving you a real demo of how to use it. That could be very useful. Anything that was by a company spokesperson was just the most useless bullshit I've sat an hour to listen to.
Yeah, I mean, this is like where my frustration with AI stuff comes in, is you just gave me an example of like a very specific,
yes,
very reasonable use case where you can explain the input and the output and the potential use, and it's something that, okay, yes, the thing that exists now that we call AI can reasonably do this. You know, at my level, what I get a lot of and have to hear a lot of and sit through is, but there won't need to be directors or authors or musicians anymore, right? Because the AI can just do all that and replace everyone. And I'm like, it can't. It just can't. It's just, you're talking about something that doesn't exist. Or like now people are like, but what if the AI gains self-awareness? And it's like, it can't. That's not what it is. It's not actually AI. It's a complete misnomer, yes, that we call it this thing. It's just a series of like probability tables that are running through existing material. And so like, it's the people talking about something that isn't real. The like people talking about the version of AI that only exists in your head or in Sam Altman's fever dream that is sold to us, versus the actual technology as it exists, which has various strengths and weaknesses, but are mostly detached from a lot of like actual real world use cases. And I'm guessing you heard some of the latter on that too, Sean, huh?
Yes, yeah. Any of the ones that were like spokespeople by Google, which I learned very quickly of how to suss that out, because it was not always clear when you looked at the schedule of presenters. Because Google hires for these kinds of things, they hire lots of former teachers and stuff to give these presentations, or former administrators. So when you're looking at the schedule, it's not telling you so-and-so from Google. It's telling you so-and-so former principal, or so-and-so former librarian and digital media expert. You have to like dig into the description and be like, aha, no, you are here because you are from Google and you're giving a presentation on Google Gemini gyms. And I'm like, this is any AI tool they're trying to give you that their explanation is, it is, a kind of jack of all trades style, Swiss Army knife tool that will do whatever you want it to do. It's useless. And they're like, and you can use it to create lesson plans, and you can use it to do feedback, and you can use it to create worksheets, and you can use it to this. Like, no. Because like almost everything you just said are not things that I need a tool to do for me. Like, I don't need a tool to write an email for me. I can write an email. I don't need a tool to do lesson plans for me. I can make a lesson plan. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for 7 years in this district, or I've been teaching for 7 years overall, 5 years in this district. But it's like, I really don't need that kind of tool. And also the lesson plans they make are so generic that it's like I might as well, like, why do I need to do an AI to get this lesson plan? I could just Google for this lesson plan, and I would find something just as good, if not better. And I think for me, like the overall the frustration I had, again, I did get some like really good tools, and the stuff the week I've been back teaching since the conference has been very fun because I've made a deliberate effort each day to use one of the different things I saw demoed, and most things ended up being very good. Now, a lot of them are, I ended up going to a lot of things that weren't AI focused that were good, but some of the AI stuff, like that chatbot, actually was a really great activity, and I saw some great learning come from it, and it gave them just a different perspective, and kind of just a different kind of thing to do. It's always good. That just gets their attention when they're interfacing with a different kind of thing. But the stuff that is frustrating with what they try to sell you is this notion of AI being this panacea, that it will do all these things for you. And the way they sell it to teachers is them acknowledging that teachers don't have enough time to do what they do, which is very true. Like it is it's the biggest truism in the world. I mean, I think people have no concept of how little time teachers are provided to do any of their work that isn't classroom teaching, because I would estimate that on an average week, I probably have about 90 minutes during the workday. And this is over the course of a week, not a day. Over the course of a week, I have probably about 90 minutes worth of dedicated time on the average week to do lesson planning and grading and parent phone calls, and anything that is not, I'm either doing a lesson or I'm in a meeting with other teachers or with administration or an IAP meeting for a student or something like that. Because you are given 90 minutes per day at my campus. That is your one class period off. Or class periods are 90 minutes long, so you have one class period per day off that you don't have a class that you're teaching, but you have lots of other administrative things that you have to do that uses up those meetings, that time over the course of the week. So I typically most weeks only have about one of those where really I can sit down and just like do that work. And it might, I don't know if it comes to a shock to some people, but 90 minutes a week is not enough time to grade assignments for 150 students and to design lesson plans for a week and to call parents and to do this, that, and the other thing. So it's like the conditions in public teaching for public high school is so poor. You are given so little resources and so little time with which to do the tasks that's being asked to do, that the pitch for AI is incredibly seductive, of that it can do all these things for you. But me trying some of those tools for that specific side of things, of make a lesson plan, make an activity, do some feedback on this assignment, do that kind of stuff, I found that it is not particularly good at that stuff. I've got some ideas of like trying something from the ground floor next year from a like planning perspective with the whole team, that maybe I could use AI in a focused way there. That's a good idea, but that's something you'd have to start at the beginning of a school year. I couldn't start implementing now. And generally those kinds of tools that are about like the efficiencies, I've found are not really don't really provide the productivity boost that they're trying to pitch. And again, I feel like after that week of going to these talks, I know a lot about like how these tools are meant to be used, seeing lots of different use cases, and I just don't think it really provides the true productivity boost that they say it does, because you're having to go back and fix things and all this kind of stuff, and the time it takes for you to provide a prompt, design a prompt, revise the prompt through like multiple revisions of seeing what it produces and being like, this isn't good enough, of like, make a slideshow for me. The word on the, like, it's supposed to say Andy's Mountain on this slide, but instead it says Andy's because it couldn't spell the word mountain, because it also can't produce a slideshow. It's providing a series of images that are formatted like a slideshow, but you can't actually edit it because it's not capable of doing this stuff because it's AI. And it's like, it all it is doing is creating a predictive image based on its training samples. So it's like a lot of that stuff is just like not that useful. And the thing that gets very frustrating when you're sitting through a lot of these talks of people from these companies being like, and teachers, I mean, we get it. We never have enough time to do anything, blah, 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 blah. And it's like at a certain point, I'm like, but the solution to that problem is not we invent a device that's supposed to do all of that work for us. The solution to that problem is you give teachers the resources and the time to do the job you're asking them to do. They've got more than 90 minutes in a day. Maybe you only have classes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you have Fridays off, which I know some districts do. Maybe you have more support personnel in the classroom that can deal with keeping track of accommodations and stuff like that. So I don't have to keep track of all that myself. Maybe you've got more teachers so that one teacher isn't teaching 150, 160. I know I've got one person on my team that's teaching 175 students is the size of their roster for one teacher. That's not reasonable. You can't do that with all the other shit you're trying to do. So it's like the solution to that problem isn't giving me this AI that's supposed to do all of my lessons and all of my grading and all that other stuff for me. So that way I actually have the time to do like the other parts of the job this AI is doing for me. The solution to that problem is improving the conditions of the job, because the reality is that none of what this AI is claiming to do is actually new. That when we were in high school, Jonathan, the things that our high school teachers did if they needed help with lesson plans and assignments and activities is they bought books, because there are books that just have worksheets and that have sample lesson plans and sample units and like short stories or whatever, for your content. Like, it's not a new phenomena that you have additional resources that you're relying upon in order to support what you're doing. And obviously a lot of that stuff moved to online, and so there's certain online resources that you use that your district gives you access to that gives you materials and support and stuff like that. AI is just another version of it, and it's not inherently better at it than any of those other things, and in many ways it's worse. Where if you had a good book that had a lot of example lessons and stuff and good activities, and you knew that book well, that's way more useful for you. And honestly, I really wish that we had more of that shit, because the more experienced I become as a teacher, the more I've worked with some other teachers that have been in the industry, that have been in this profession for a very long time. I look back on some of the resources they have that's like, well, here's some scans of things I used to use like 15 years ago. I'm like, this shit's great. Why are we making a new version of this? It was like, ethos, pathos, and logos didn't change in the past 15 years. This activity's fantastic. These worksheets are great that they could use. And it's like, man, yeah, we could put this in a slideshow and it's awesome. Why are we redoing all of this shit all the time with a new version of technology? And it's just crazy. And that, that was like the two sides of the conference to me. It's like one side was like getting some stuff that was like really interesting and like legitimately useful, that was from the perspective of classroom teachers showing you a tool. And then the other side of it was sitting on these like pie in the sky talks about how AI is going to make your job so much better. And me sitting there thinking about like, but this is just like, I feel like I could make a movie or something that's like an avant-garde movie where there's like 5 parallel storylines of teachers across different decades, and it's like they're all at the same conference, and you're just intercutting between it, and it's like whatever the different version of what the AI solution is from the 1950s or the 1970s or the 1980s or the 2000s. And it's like, it's all these like snake oil salesmen trying to sell you this panacea, when the reality is that there are fundamental structural issues with the American educational system that create these problems. And any technology is a bandage over that problem. It is not a solution to that problem.
It's not. And it's, if AI could do all the things it claims and it really solved that productivity, all those productivity issues for you, Sean, what the district would do is pay for those AI tools and then give you 50 extra students. Exactly. Because now you have free time. And then you just have a new series of time crunches that AI can't address. And now blah, blah, we just keep going. This is always, there's a plot line on this season of The Pit, the emergency room drama on HBO Max, where you have this new attending doctor in the ER who is trying to get the residents to use generative AI for their charting, because this is a problem with like emergency room physicians, is that you have to do a lot of charting, but you don't usually have time between patients, so you have to stay after to do your charting, which sucks. It's like grading after school or something, right? It's just, he's like, well, use the generative AI for your charting. And it's the first time someone tries it, it's like, that's not the medication I prescribed. If the patient took that, they'd die. And like, this is like a plot line going on in the season, is this tension of like, she's like, well, yeah, you have to revise it and make sure it's correct. And it's like, but at that point, And it's just this exact problem that they're shining a light on that, like, is completely applicable to teaching or any other kind of, like, public service profession, right?
Yes, where the workload is completely unreasonable for like what it is, and that the thing you're doing is like incredibly important, it's like, and you're like, we can't just fuck it up. It's like, it's not a job that you can just sort of like sleep your way through. It's like, this is something like it's really important that you do a good job at this shit. And so that's that was a big part of the conference. I did very much enjoy it overall. I did find it very interesting and insightful in many ways. And one thing that was cool is that you got to meet some interesting people, because you've got a whole big exhibitor hall of people hawking their wares. And, the mistake to make when you go to the exhibitor hall is stay in the kind of main area where you've got your Googles in Magic School and all the kind of big education companies there that you don't need to hear what they have to say. It's like, what they have to say. But if you go around the edges of the exhibitor hall, you find like a lot of interesting things. Here's a website designed by one dude who's a former teacher. And here's actually a great example of probably the best thing I found is a website called, I think it's myshortanswer.com. And it's basically a website that's designed to do one thing. You sign in to like whatever the thing you are, make a link and put it on Canvas, and the students sign into it. I give them a specific prompt they have to answer. I give them whatever, I have like, take 3 minutes and answer this prompt. And they type in their answers. And then once everyone's done or the timer's up, it submits their answer. And then it shows them a random sampling anonymously of the other students in the class that answered that prompt in their writing. And it shows them 2 of them at a time. And then you give them a rubric of, I want you to pick which one of these 2 has the best use of textual evidence. And they look at it and they pick which one is best. And then you do that for however many samples you want them to see. And then you can see as a class and collate that information, see, here are what you guys voted as the best body paragraphs that use textual evidence to prove this point. And now we can look at the 5 ones you voted as the best ones, and we can look at those. And it's like, that is an awesome fucking tool.
That's great, yeah.
It's so good. And it's a website designed and run by like one dude. That guy was there at the conference in the exhibitor hall. And I also went to a presentation. That's how I found out about it. It was a presentation with a teacher giving a demo. And then I didn't realize the actual guy who made it and programmed it was there, and talked to him for a little bit. And it's like, that's awesome. And like, that's the kind of thing that you need, is someone who has a vision for a very specific kind of thing to do. And this, like, the rapid feedback and exposure students get to other student writing examples. And it's so efficient because if you're trying to do it on paper, it's just such a fucking hassle to have them swap papers around and all that kind of shit. It's like having it all in this one platform. It's great. And so there was a lot of really cool stuff like that I got to see at the conference. And I very quickly started to tailor my experience to that and not to the 8th Google demo of Gemini or whatever else was there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. How was the Alamo?
The Alamo was very interesting. More interesting than the Alamo itself is the museum on the Alamo. So, obviously, the Alamo, it's what is remaining there is just that kind of main church building that's very small, and it's cool as like a historical artifact. If you're somebody who's very interested in the architecture and stuff, you can go see that. And that was, fun to see. The thing that is actually really awesome, though, is that there's a museum right next to the Alamo. And this is where the Phil Collins of it all comes in. Because I don't know, Jonathan, if you knew this, but I did not know this, is that Phil Collins is a mega nerd for the Alamo and the Mexican-American War. And he is an avid collector of historical artifacts related to the Alamo. So much so that the museum on the premises of the actual Alamo, that is the Alamo Museum, I would estimate probably about half of the artifacts of that museum were donated to that museum, or on loan to that museum, probably more accurately, from the private collection of one British singer and songwriter, Phil Collins, who you may know from Disney's Tarzan or from the song with the do-doom, 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 do-doom. And
It's Coming in the Air Tonight,
yes.
By Phil Collins, yes.
And it was a very bizarre experience to be like looking at all these artifacts, and it's an amazing collection of artifacts. Like that, I like seeing the Alamo just fine, but the museum I thought was way cooler because it's a whole range of things from obviously like 19th century firearms to like actual Bowie knives from, when David Bowie was around, and like a family Bible that had like the whole family line of like, you could see when this guy was like married, and it was like this illuminated Bible, and his kids and when they were born, and his wife died and he got remarried, and you got to see he had like 5 kids and 3 of them died before they were 3 years old. Like all these amazing historical artifacts. And again, like half of them you're like, from the Phil Collins collection. I'm like, that's just very strange. The best part of the museum, and if people go to the Alamo, like this is the thing I would like, is the number one thing to go see, is go to the museum, look at all the artifacts, they're awesome. And then there's a room near the back of the museum that's this like big room that in the middle of it has a massive diorama. There's like a scale diorama of the Alamo and the surrounding areas, basically built up to look like when the big battle happened. And then there is a presentation that's probably a 10 to 15 minute presentation on a loop of like taking you day by day, like kind of hour by hour, like on the build up to, and then like very like the incremental details of the battle as it unfolded, with like spotlights that shine on from the ceiling that show you the different parts of like, and then along the west wall, you can see that there was a gap in this and they filled it with a wooden palisade and all this kind of stuff. And that presentation is narrated by Phil Collins, very British Phil Collins himself. And it's just so fucking funny to me. Like, I couldn't get over it because it's great. Like, he's so good at it. Like, you can tell he's like legitimately way into this shit when he's like reading off this narration about like, and through the bitter gun smoke from the cannons, they could see the flags of the Mexican army and all this shit. And he's just getting into it. And it's just really interesting and very funny. But it's also great, like, because I'm interested in the Alamo. I'm not like a huge Alamo guy. That's like, my dad is way into the Alamo because he grew up when the fucking, the movies were a big thing and the TV shows were a big thing. And my dad is from basically the same generation as Phil Collins. So I can only assume it's the same thing, that Phil Collins grew up watching those TV shows and everything, and the movies that were coming out, and that's how he got way into the Alamo and just ended up becoming a big fan of it and ended up collecting these random artifacts over the years with his vast wealth of being, a titan of the music industry. Which, if you're going to be like obscenely rich, that's a great way to use your money. Like, thank you, Phil Collins. Like, yes, go and like start finding weird random antiques and artifacts and just donate them to this museum and stuff. That's a way better use of your money than what a lot of other very rich people do.
I'm seeing right now on his Wikipedia page, he did donate the collection to the Alamo via the state of Texas, and in honor of that, he was named by your state legislature, Sean, an honorary Texan. So British Phil Collins is an honorary Texan. What a journey.
Yeah, if there's one criticism I would make of the museum, it's that it isn't just blasting Phil Collins music the whole time, which would have just made the cognitive dissonance so much more pure, Like, I desperately need them to make a new Alamo movie that just has a dramatic version of In the Air Tonight in the trailer, It's like, now that I know this information that Phil Collins is a massive Alamo nerd, like, I need the world to reflect that information in a more specific way, because I'll never be able to watch Disney's Tarzan the same way again. It's just, I'll be thinking about it the whole fucking time. It's like, this is made by, all this music's from a dude who's just like thinking about the Alamo the whole time he's making this music. You just know it.
How do they not have, like, a video presentation of, like, 2 guys riding on horseback to the Alamo that is an homage to the Miami Vice scene where In the Air Tonight plays? And, like, one of them gets off his horse and, like, thinks about his wife before he knows, I'm going into battle. I'm probably not coming back. Was it real? Was what we had real? Yeah, that's what I want.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a very cool museum. Phil Collins is awesome, and it was it's just a very strange experience. But yeah, it was a fun thing to go do.
Awesome. Anything else from your San Antonio adventures?
I think that about sums it up. I mean, a lot of my time there was just the conference or just going on the walk on the River Walk, which was very cool. There's a very strange experience of the drive up there. Drove past a car that was on the side of the road that was just on fire. I can't explain how or why that happened. I hope nobody got hurt in it, but it was just like from a movie, just a car fucking on fire on the side of the road. Which was an ominous start to what was a totally kind of normal trip. If I was there, it's like, if I was a superstitious person, I would turn around and go home, because I ain't never seen a car just in fucking flames like you hit it in a rocket launcher in Grand Theft Auto. Certainly not in fucking, on a highway in Texas on, like, the outer edge of Houston. Like, once I was in the middle of nowhere. This is, like, right out of Houston,
Sean,
a car just on fire.
This sounds like the first scene of a zombie movie,
yes.
where, like, as you're rubbernecking to look at the car on fire, you hit something, you go, oh no, and you get out to check, and then a zombie comes in and bites your neck, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the beginning of the movie.
That's what it felt like. I was just like, did like this double take of like, what the fuck? I've never in my life seen a car just in fucking flames on the side of a road. It did just have me like, it's like, am I in The Last of Us? What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. All right. Well, I've been having some adventures, Sean, in a fun, far-off place, the Sky Kingdom of Zenithia, because I've been playing some Dragon Quest, Sean. I've decided this is my video game project for this year, is I want to play as much of the Dragon Quests I have not played as I can. And I started with one that I actually have played before, but I wanted to play a different version of it. So this was, I've just so everyone knows, previously I've played Dragon Quest 1, 2, 3, both like the original-ish versions of those, and then the new HD 2D remakes. I've played 11, because we've talked about that a lot before, and I had previously played Dragon Quest 4 on the Nintendo DS, but the DS has the remakes of 4, 5, and 6 that are all done in the same PS1 style as Dragon Quest 7, its original version. And those are like pretty much the definitive versions of 4, 5, and 6 at this point. The problem with the DS port of Dragon Quest 4 in English is that, and I didn't realize this until I was deep enough into the game that I didn't want to switch to a different version, but the English release of Dragon Quest 4, when you're playing like the original cartridge, which is what I have, is it has a glitch where the party chat feature, which is like integral to Dragon Quest 4, 5, 6, those remakes, is missing. It's not missing in the sense that, like, they stripped it out. It's missing in that there's a glitch, which is whenever you hit the party chat button, which is just the B button. It's one of the dedicated face buttons. It says there's no one to talk to, even if you have a full party. So, from what we can tell, they translated all the party chat. It's probably in the game's code somewhere, but there's a horrific glitch. So for that reason, the version people will usually recommend you play is Dragon Quest IV on iOS or Android, because 4, 5, and 6 are all on iOS and Android, and those are just straight ports of the DS versions. They have some other nice enhancements, they run at a higher resolution, higher frame rate, some of that stuff, but those are the versions. Those versions, for 5 and 6, it's the same. You play it on DS, you play it on iOS, it kind of just depends on what you have, but for 4, they did fix that on iOS, and so if you play the iOS version of 4, you get all the party chat. And I like that enough, and it had been long enough since I played Dragon Quest IV, and I was just coming off the 1, 2, 3 remakes that I thought, you know what, I want to play, 4 is not that long, a JRPG, I want to play that again, I want to kind of get through it, and I want to do the iOS version so I can see all of the party chat. And so I did that again. Dragon Quest IV is great. Dragon Quest IV is not, like, to me, absolute top shelf Dragon Quest. I think it's really good. I love, the central conceit of that one is that it's effectively, sometimes this gets overstated in discourse about this game because it is not actually the bulk of the game, but the first 8 to 10 hours or so are a series of chapters with the characters who will become the hero's party members in the second half of the game. And those parts are really fun. It's cool to see. It's just like a series of like little 1 to 2 hour short stories. Obviously the most memorable one being the one with Torneko Taloon, the merchant who later became a big spin-off character in his own right, where you are doing some battling in that chapter, but mainly you're like being a merchant going around and selling stuff. And then about 10 hours in, you switch to the main hero and you have his story or her story. That's actually one where you can pick the gender of the protagonist. And then you go around and you gradually collect all of the characters who you met in the prologue chapters and then go on the main quest. So the bulk of the game, like 2/3 of the game, is the hero in like hours 10 to 30, but those first 10 hours are those like prologue chapters, and it is really cool. And Dragon Quest IV is clearly a very influential game. Because, like, I don't think, without Dragon Quest IV, I don't think you have Octopath Traveler. I think Live Alive is very substantially indebted to what it's doing. I think even stuff like, what's the game where you play as a shop owner, Reciteer? Is that what it's called? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That one has, like, a lot of, like, the Torneko stuff in it. So, like, it's just, I think that's a game that has been very influential, and it's a very good Dragon Quest game. It's got an amazing soundtrack. It's got some really good story beats. Particularly, Dragon Quest IV has the best Dragon Quest villain. It has Sorrow the Manslayer, who in the DS remake, and this is actually pulled from the PS1 remake of this game, but basically any modern version of Dragon Quest IV you play, there's an additional chapter at the end where you can redeem Sorrow the Manslayer and bring him onto your team and then go after the true villain, and you have a whole true ending thing. And that whole part is fucking awesome. And so, like, yeah, not my absolute favorite Dragon Quest. I think there's some stuff in it that feels like, just compared to like later games that have done some of those ideas, is slightly more half-baked. But I do, like, all the characters are awesome. Playing it with the party chat really fleshes out that game for me, because being able to hear from your companions at any time, because the party chat in Dragon Quest, they go all out for. Like, you can talk to them anywhere, anytime, and they almost always have something new to say. And that is just the way those characters become characterized in the context of the world is super fun. And, you know, a great enough game that I didn't even mind playing it on my iPhone. I actually kind of enjoyed it. Those iOS ports and Android ports do not have any controller support, because they were made way back in like 2014 before you connected controllers to iPhones, so like that's just not a thing in there. But it doesn't really matter, because they're all played in portrait mode, but that is exactly how the DS games work. The DS games use both screens, and so the iOS ports are actually very faithful to what the DS ones do. But I finished Dragon Quest IV, and then I moved immediately on to Dragon Quest V, and for this I did go back to my Nintendo DS, because while there are some nice things about playing on the iPhone, I'm sorry, nothing beats buttons. Buttons are the ultimate special feature for a video game. It's just, having buttons is very nice. And I actually bought last year a Nintendo DSi XL. I was able to get a Japanese version where they call it the LL, the large, I guess, which I think is funny. And the DSi LL is awesome, because while you can play original DS games on your 3DS, you don't really want to, because the resolution difference, the way the 3DS handles that, makes DS games look like fucking garbage. Particularly anything text-heavy, the text becomes nigh unreadable on the 3DS. And so if you have the original DS or the DSi LL, which maintains the resolution but just makes the screens bigger, is really ideal. And so so I was finally able to break that thing out and start playing Dragon Quest V on it. And while I like Dragon Quest IV a lot, and it was fun to replay that game, and I enjoyed it a lot, Dragon Quest V is the one that most fans say is the best game. It's the one Yuji Horii, creator of Dragon Quest himself, says is the best game, and I will now tell you that it is the best game. I have a little bit left to play. I'm about 30 hours in. I just got to the Underworld, which is like the final stage of the game. Not giving any spoilers for what happens there, but that's like the last area you go to. And Dragon Quest V is an absolute miracle of a game. This is the period where, starting with 4, Dragon Quest gets pretty experimental in how it starts structuring its story. So 4 has the whole chapter conceit. But again, that's really only limited to like the first 10 hours, and then it is a more typical Dragon Quest game. Dragon Quest V is way more out there fulsomely for the entire game. It is the one where you have your main character. You start the game literally starts with a scene of his birth, and you continue until he's about 30 years old, and it has 3 overall time periods that you play through. When you are a little kid with your dad, and then when you are a young man, and that is when you get married and have children, and then the final section is when your kids are about 8 years old, and you're on an adventure with them. And so your party members, like pretty much all your human party members, are either direct family members or like people who are so close they might as well be family members, like your dad's assistant Sancho, who continues with you in the later part of the game. And so they are your family, and you have this RPG that is told over time. It does things with that format that is truly spectacular. The storytelling is incredibly moving. I think the game is very canny about how children see the world. Both when you are young and you are a little kid out on an adventure, usually with your cat, Saber. And I just love the image of you as this little Akira Toriyama hero with your Akira Toriyama Saber cat going out to do adventures as a little kid behind your dad's back. That is so fun. And I think the way it portrays like childhood whimsy in that stretch is amazing. But on the flip side of that, when you are an adult and you have 8-year-old children, that is where the party chat in Dragon Quest V becomes some of the most amazing writing I've ever seen in a video game, where like you will go back to locations where bad stuff happen to you, because the hero of Dragon Quest V is basically a Job figure where he just keeps getting shit on by the world in the most horrific of ways, but he sticks with it, he maintains his faith anyway. And you keep going back to places where bad things happened earlier in the story, and like if you kick, you say party chat, your son will say something like, Dad, are you crying? What's going on? Or your daughter will say, Dad, it's okay to tell us what happened here. Or one of my favorite lines in the game is where you go back to, I think it's the village where your wife comes from, and at this point in the story, she's still missing, and you're having to look for her. And your son says, Dad, I know you're sad. I know more than you think I do. Like, there's stuff like that, like very canny ways of like kids who have observed things in their parents and reflected in a way that is like blunt in the way children are blunt. And that kind of writing is just amazing. The way it uses like the basic mechanics of JRPGs to tell its story in very subtle but thoughtful ways, like the fact that this is also a game where you can basically catch monsters. It came out a couple years before Pokemon, and it is kind of a proto-Pokemon in the way that I think there's 40 of the monster designs in the game can become party members. And it's not an active catching system, it's like more randomized than that. But when I say they become party members, full-fleshed, you can equip them, you can teach them spells, you can level them. And for parts of the game, they are your entire party, because there's parts, like particularly in the middle stretch of the timeline, where you are the only human party member, and so you're just on an adventure with all of your monster friends, and you're building a team based on which monsters sort of have the skills you need, and so you have all of that. But that means that for a lot of the game, you don't have any party members that feel like they're in that kind of jack-of-all-trades mode that most JRPGs have characters like that, right? That can do more than one thing. Like, your hero is noticeably deficient in some key ways in what he can equip and what he can do. But when you have your kids, they're literally better than you. They literally can do more. They have the stuff that you have, but they can do more than you. And it's like this statement the game is making through its game mechanics of the way, as generations progress, hopefully you are passing more on to your kids than you had. And that is like this thing that is communicated purely through game design. And it's stuff like that is just extraordinary. And then on top of that, it does all of the things, that Dragon Quest games do phenomenally, which is they have the best battle system in JRPGs, and they have outstanding, dungeon design. And the worlds are super cool, and the basic loop of getting the different colored keys that open different doors, and gradually you have a ship. In Dragon Quest V, you have a magic carpet. Eventually you have a dragon, all of the ways you can go around the world, all of that. You can tell how much I love Dragon Quest V based on how much time I spent grinding in the casino for the best sword, because it's a game I loved enough that I dared going into a Dragon Quest casino, which is a dangerous thing, because those casinos, you're not going to lose any real money in there, but you might lose your sanity a little bit, because they do not... The thing about Dragon Quest casinos is that they are not like video game casinos that are like tilted to like have pity systems and stuff. They're like actual slot machines in Vegas that are there to make you lose all your money. And so grinding them takes quite a bit of patience. But I love all of that. There's some of the side stuff in the game is amazing. It's a towering work of video game art. It's like humbling at points to see how much Yuji Horii and company were doing with this, having basically perfected the formula of the JRPG over those early Dragon Quest games. They were so miles ahead of where Final Fantasy was. If you look at like the equivalent time, like which Final Fantasy game, which came out against which Dragon Quest, it's kind of funny. And then like in 4 and then in 5, really going to town on how you can build a narrative around this. And I think 5 is doing stuff that I've never seen any other game even approach trying to do, particularly in that idea of the passage of time, of having kids, of having a substantial amount of the adventure where it is about a dad going on a journey with his sons. Like, you have to wait until you get to stuff like God of War 2018 to, I think, have some similar dynamics in a video game. And Dragon Quest V was doing it in 1992. It's really extraordinary, and one of my very favorite games I have ever played. and I cannot wait to finish this podcast so I can go finish it, because it's just extraordinary. And I hope I find time this year to continue and do 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, which are the other ones I haven't played. I don't think I'll be able to play 10 because it's the MMO exclusive to Japan, but there you go.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm still. I finished 4 was the last one I did. I think I did that 2 years ago, playing the DS version, the Japanese DS version on my Nintendo 2DS XL that I jailbroke. And I've just been waiting for having a good chunk of time to do. I was going to do Dragon Quest V last summer, because that's kind of been the thing I've done, is I find a time over the summer to do a JRPG, and then I ended up replaying all the Dark Souls games in Elden Ring, and that kind of took up my whole summer of video game playing. So maybe this year I'll finally buckle down and do 5. Because Dragon Quest 4 is awesome, and it's just like, it's one of those things where, as you're kind of saying with 5, also, like, you look at it and you look at when it came out and you're like, what the fuck? It's just where you're like, because Dragon Quest was just not a big thing over here, and Dragon Quest 4 Dragon Quest 5 never came out over here originally.
5 and 6 are the 2 we didn't get.
Yeah, 4 did as Dragon Warrior 4 back in the day. There's a couple year gap. But it's like, because they weren't really popular, I think, like, in the West, your perspective on the history of storytelling in RPGs is just kind of wrong, because you don't see how, like, essential Dragon Quest 4 is in that cycle of, like, having, like, this proper bigger narrative with proper characters. Obviously the character stuff is, like, enhanced tremendously through having the party chat feature, but it's there even if you didn't have the party chat. And because you build up those characters through those different chapters where you play as them, and thinking through, like, how you represent who these people are through the game mechanics and getting all these different versions of that. It's like, it's a game that was so ahead of its time. And then obviously sounds like 5 even more so, not just, like, ahead of its time, but, like, the genre still rarely ever kind of, like, gets back to this kind of more free-form experimental storytelling style that these Dragon Quest, post-3 Dragon Quest games had. Because I think the notion of let's have you play as all these different characters in their own chapters, experience the world through their eyes and the mechanics through their eyes, and then bring that all together as one grand adventure from the hero's perspective, it's like that would feel like an almost subversive narrative design if you still did it now, because you still are so accustomed to the very standard style RPG narrative about the one great hero and him just going off on an adventure and getting his party members that way. And the way that 4 flips the structure of that narrative is so awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited that I need to get to 5, and then, as I say, the 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know, maybe I'll find some way to be like, I don't know, play some version of 10. I know that there's some sort of offline something or other they're trying with that.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and it tells you how... It's a frustration I have with Western games, not just journalism such as it is, but, like, criticism and history and even academia, is how completely ignorant of Dragon Quest it is. Just, like, willfully ignorant at a certain point, because, like... If you look at, like, the Square Enix HD 2D games, and you look at, like, an Octopath Traveler, no, Octopath Traveler is not an updated version of Final Fantasy. Yeah. It is so much more clearly an updated version of Dragon Quest IV. It is like, that is the primary referent for that game in some ways. Like, is Final Fantasy an influence? Yes, but Final Fantasy is so often overstated in its historical import here. Like, you and I grew up learning, and I think people still do, that Final Fantasy IV is the one that introduced narratives to JRPGs. Final Fantasy IV came out a year and a half after Dragon Quest IV. And Dragon Quest IV just flat out, and I love Final Fantasy IV. I love that game. Dragon Quest IV has a more fleshed out narrative. It has a way more fleshed out, like, gameplay loop and battle system and all of that stuff. There's just so many things about it that, like, are just more ahead of its time than Final Fantasy IV. And they don't need to be in competition. I'm not trying to say that you have to make them fight. Final Fantasy IV is a wonderful video game. But if you are writing the history and you are trying to make that claim, it is wrong in the, like, overall sweep of history thing. And that is a problem that happens because Final Fantasy is the one that came over here and Dragon Quest didn't. And so, I mean, Dragon Quest did, but it wasn't as popular. But, like, in Japan, where the people designing these games live, it is the dominant JRPG series. It just is.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. It's a similar phenomena as like what happened with Neon Genesis Evangelion versus Gundam, and
Yeah.
it's just because EVA was so popular over here without having the equivalent level of popularity for Gundam. You have that perpetual narrative of it. Oh, it deconstructs the mecha genre, and it's just crazy that it's like a boy who doesn't want to ride the mech. It's like, oh, okay. It's like I mean, hey, if it's the thing you watched, it's the thing you watched. Or if it's the game you played, it's the game you played. But as you say, when you're trying to construct like a sort of the narrative history of this genre, this type of thing, it's like you're missing a really huge piece if you didn't play Dragon Quest, or you're missing a really huge piece if you didn't watch any Gundam.
Yeah. So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm definitely on a roll with these. Like, I talked up, to hell and back how much I enjoyed those HD 2D remakes that came out for Dragon Quest 1, 2, 3, and I really do, and I adore those, particularly the 3 remake. But there is something about going back to, like, OG Dragon Quest without some of the... Now, I think the HD 2D remakes are good about not overdoing the modern bells and whistles and allowing you to toggle some things on and off, and that's not really my problem with them. But there's something about just the slightly more sparseness of these. They're a little more hardcore even on some of the menu management stuff. They don't have any voice acting, which I think there is something about. I like the voice acting in some of the modern Dragon Quest games. I also don't think it's like a mistake that the series didn't have that for a long time. I think there's something about the writing and about the music, that there's something in the silence of it that can also be very moving. Would I play an HD 2D remake of Dragon Quest V that had voice acting and some of that stuff? Sure, and I bet it would be amazing. But there is something fun about going back to like the DS remakes as well, and they hold up tremendously well. Yeah, and then my big decision will come when I get to Dragon Quest VII and decide which version of that to play. I will, just so people know, I'm not really interested in playing the new reimagined version. Mainly, I think the visuals look fucking gorgeous, and like that part of it I would love to experience because it looks really cool. But it's sanded off a lot of like what makes Dragon Quest, and even like just basic JRPG stuff. Like in the 7 reimagined version, if a party member dies, they just revive at the end of the battle. So, like, there's no purpose to going to churches. There's no purpose in having all of the revive spells and items. It takes out whole parts of the game. And there's other, like, things they've done to, like, make it much, much easier. But also, that is a very, very abridged version of 7. My understanding is that 7 Reimagined comes in at maybe 60 hours and the original is like over 100, so they've cut huge reams of content out of that game. And maybe it makes it better, maybe it doesn't, but I want to see what it like was originally before I would engage with that. So I'm probably going to play either the PS1 version or the 3DS version of that one. Probably the PS1 version, honestly, because it is the visual style that the 4, 5, 6 remakes use, so it would just, the continuity of that would be very clear. But I'm excited to get to that one, because 7 is such a weird, like, controversial entry in the Dragon Quest lineage, let's say. So I'm excited to see it. But I'm enjoying my time with Dragon Quest.
Yes, I mean, it's one of the great franchises, for sure, in the history of video games.
Yep. Well, Sean, I'm okay moving on to the monthly 10 if you are. Did you have any other stuff you really needed to do today?
I mean, it's a totally minor thing, but I just want to shout it out because it's a thing I put onto my little Sean stuff in the notes because I felt sad only having one bullet point. It's a little anime I watched. I just want to shout it out because it's not like it's that good, but I found it very amusing, and it was a nice thing to watch when I was very tired at the hotel room after the conference, and I was like, I just am not in a headspace to watch what we were covering for Japanimation Station because partially I wanted to watch the nice Blu-ray version I had for that, and I was like, I need to be able to actually pay attention to it. So instead, I was like, I'm just gonna load up Crunchyroll and watch and just look for something that looks kind of trashy and watch that. And I watched a show that honestly is quite entertaining if you're in the mood for like a kind of lowbrow trashy anime. Not lowbrow in that it's like just got a lot of sex and violence or stuff, although it is fairly violent. More just that it's not trying to be anything special. And that's a show called May I Ask for One Final Thing? A weird title. I just want to give you the pitch of what the show is. It is an entry into the weirdly heavily populated villainous genre, or Akiyaku Deijo, if you want the Japanese name, which is like where you imagine a story told from the perspective of the generic villainess from like a female dating sim game where you're supposed to be some sort of like homely, Jane Austen protagonist-esque young woman who romances all these different boys in kind of high society. And then there's this generic villain character who is this like rich, noble woman who kind of tries to impede this commoner's attempts at romancing these princes and stuff like that. It's like a character archetype. And this is like this whole genre. It's such a specific subgenre that reframes those narratives from the perspective of that kind of villain trope. A lot of them are also isekais. This one's not an isekai. But the pitch for this is it's that you're from the perspective of this sort of like rich, noble woman who people from the outside maybe think that she's evil, but she's actually like a good person. And the first episode is her being stood up basically by this prince whom she is betrothed to, who is now cutting off their engagement so that he can be with this common young woman who he's fallen in love with. And then you get this whole thing where from the main character's perspective, she flashes back to this awful life she's had being betrothed to this just utter fucking idiot, abusive asshole prince who she doesn't care for, doesn't want to be with him, and all these things. And then this sort of like public shaming he's trying to expose her to by publicly cutting off this engagement. And where the title comes from is she just goes after this whole thing, this big flashback, and her just kind of swallowing up all of this frustration and anger at this piece of shit guy. She says, okay, fine, like I'll accept you breaking off this engagement, but can I ask for one final thing? He's like, yeah, what is it? Can I punch you in the fucking face? And then she puts gloves on, and then she just violently beats the shit out of every single person in that room, including the prince. And the premise of the series is that she is this rich, noble woman who, when she gets frustrated, the way she gets out her emotions is she beats the shit, like violently pummels the ever-living shit out of like corrupt aristocracy and shit like that. It's such a fucking great premise for a show. It's so funny. And the main character, Scarlet, is voiced by Asami Seto, who does a great vocal performance. You'd know her as Kugisaki Nobara from the Jujutsu Kaisen show. And it's just, there's something so cathartic about every storyline as her encountering some other kind of prick, some, other aristocratic buffoon who's a misogynist or whatever, and her putting up to it for a certain extent, and then her getting extreme personal satisfaction out of just violently beating the shit out of them with her bare hands.
This sounds like a show we need right now, Sean. I don't know, man. I wanted the American version of this where this person lives in the White House.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know what I expected going into this show. I have a fondness for these, like, villainous shows, which are, again, very kind of lowbrow, popular, kind of just, like, they're not going for a lot. You just kind of play around with some fun character tropes and then move on with your life. But this one is particularly entertaining. It's just a regular 13-episode show. It came out last fall. If you've got a Crunchyroll subscription and you're looking for something to watch, it's just like a nice breezy show that, again, it's not amazing. It's like a 7 out of 10 kind of show. It's not going to blow your mind or anything, but it's just got fun characters. It's got a fun premise, and it just is extremely cathartic. Especially, again, I was watching it mostly very exhausted in the San Antonio hotel room on my laptop, and I had a pretty good time. So I wanted to shout it out.
Awesome. That sounds fun. Yeah. Well, do you want to go ahead and move into the monthly 10, Sean? Because I have a good one for you.
Yes, I'm very excited for this monthly 10 because I am the one who gave you a topic for this week's episode, Jonathan.
Yes, well, in honor of Resident Evil Requiem, Resident Evil 9, which is coming out in about a week here, very excited, you asked me to do a top 10 list of Resident Evil spin-offs that Capcom should make to capitalize on the brand now that we are in the second half of the 2020s. Is that about right, what you wanted, Sean?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we used to live in a world where there's just a billion Resident Evil games. There's like Resident Evil on the Game Boy and stuff like that. It just feels like, we're just getting mainline Resident Evils and remakes. It's like, I want some other shit in the world of Resident Evil.
Well, I think I've done justice to this idea, Sean. I've brought in every Capcom franchise I felt I could reasonably merge with this. Some outside Capcom franchises. I think I've got some good ideas, and you can brainstorm these with me, Sean, to figure out what the best version of each of these will be. All right, we're going to start small. We're going to get more crazy as we go on. So number 10. I think it's finally time for a Biohazard kart racer. We want Resident Evil Kart. And it's Mario Kart, basically, but with Resident Evil. I think the gimmick for this needs to be every racer has some kind of brutal attack they can do on their rivals. My first image that I had in mind, do you remember the original, like, box art for Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo? Mm-hmm. And it's got, like, Mario in front, like, Bowser's in the back going, ah! I'm kind of imagining in that position as Bowser, you would have the chainsaw guy from Resident Evil 4 coming in, because his attack would be that he can pull out the chainsaw and cut off the heads of other riders, and then their cart just spins out and they're out of the race. So something like that, but every character has something like that they can do.
I like that. I definitely think the Resident Evil Racers, or whatever it's called, is a great idea. What jumps to my mind visually is, for whatever reason, I immediately thought of the very bad game Star Wars Super Bombad Racing. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
I don't know that one.
If you look up the box art for it, it's like Star Wars characters from the prequels, but they've got like big, kind of like almost bobblehead, like a kind of bobblehead aesthetic, and that's what popped in my head immediately is like Leon S. Kennedy from Resident Evil 4, but a big bobblehead in a little like car or whatever, and all the Resident Evil characters in that art style. For whatever reason, that's the thing that comes to mind when you say Resident Evil, but the racing, but a kart racer.
Yeah, this is a PS2 game, and I'm seeing like the cover of it. It's basically like a Darth Maul Funko Pop in a racer. It's so bad. Oh my god, yeah, no, I'd be on board with that. Sure, that sounds good too.
Yes, but absolutely, I like they're shooting chainsaws and shit at each other, and just make it like also very graphically violent. And you know, if you die, you get just like ripped into two pieces or something.
Yeah, exactly. All right. My number 9 is I think that they should do a partnership with Type Moon and have a Resident Evil event in Fate Grand Order where Leon S. Kennedy is summoned as a servant. And as I was telling that, I thought specifically, I don't know if this is how Fate Grand Order works, but in my mind, I want a story where Leon S. Kennedy is summoned as a servant in the Holy Grail War, specifically to Ilya, Shiro's half-sister. In the story, because so something about her and Leon in a similar kind of like Ashley Leon dynamic would be really funny to me.
See, the thing that immediately comes to mind for me is if we're putting him in FGO, it's got to be a gender bent Leon S. Kennedy, in the same way that they do this with like all these historical figures, obviously with King Arthur and Saber, and it's Leon but a girl. And you know, you just come up with some sort of weird narrative justification for it. And yeah, it's some sort of like Holy Grail War is happening in Raccoon City. And all these other servants have shown up, and it's this sort of like whole crazy event. Absolutely. Yes. I need a gender bent Leon S. Kennedy. I'm trying to think of who would be like the 4-star kind of character that they just give you for free in an event. Because in FGO, you kind of always have like, here's a free servant that you get. That's just a free character. And then Leon is going to be a 5-star. You got to fucking pay money if you want to get Leon S. Kennedy.
The mean answer would be Chris, but yes. You know, because like Chris is good, but Leon is where it's at.
Or if like we're sticking with more Resident Evil 4-ish stuff, it could be Ashley is your 4-star servant that is your...
No. Wait a second. What's the name of the Spanish guy in that game? What's his name again? Who's
Carlos? With you? Is it Carlos?
I forget, but it should be that guy, and when he sees female Leon S. Kennedy, he gets to make the ballistic missiles line. Mr. Kennedy, I didn't realize you were packing ballistic missiles.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of this. It's Luis. Carlos is the guy from Resident Evil 3. Luis is the guy from Resident Evil 4.
Yes. Luis can be there, and he can make a ballistic missiles joke.
Yes, and he can be another 5-star servant. Or at least he'd be one of the craft essences, which are little things you equip that have like little art pieces that have all the other characters in them.
Yes. All right, number 8, Resident Evil Dancing All Night. That's what I wrote down. And it sounds stupid, but because Resident Evil is not a game series particularly known for its slam and dance melodies, I mean, Resident Evil has good music, but it's not that kind of music.
Yes, it's right.
I think we got to get Lotus Juice in here from the Persona games to write a whole soundtrack of Biohazard-themed raps for the cast to dance to. And I think we should also have, in the vein of Persona 4 Dancing All Night, a story that involves some kind of horribly contrived scenario whereby the characters must dance in order to evade the zombies. Like, Umbrella has unleashed some kind of new virus, and the only way to calm the anger of the infected is to dance for them and to, hold their passions at bay with your amazing dancing. And you can just have all the Resident Evil characters doing some crazy dances.
Yeah, in obviously the main story mode, Ashley has, the president's daughter, has decided to become a pop idol singer.
Yes.
And so Leon is requisitioned to be her bodyguard / manager. And Claire, I want Claire Redfield to be there as well as like another manager. Maybe he's the bodyguard, she's the manager for the new pop idol unit. But I want all of the music to just be raw tracks from Resident Evil. Don't make them dance music. I want the infamous basement music from the original Resident Evil that is just an absolute cacophony of nightmare noises, and just the full-on horror movie style music that Resident Evil obviously has that is not at all conducive to a rhythm game, and just, I want to inflict a lot of psychic damage on the players of this game.
So the dances, you would have to get like an avant-garde dance troupe.
Yes.
To
like interpretive dances and shit like
yes.
that. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I liked my Lotus Juice idea, but I think your idea is better, so we'll go with that.
You can have one Lotus Juice rap song.
Okay.
That's like the bonus track you get that plays over the end credits.
My number 7, Sean, is a game I'm calling Beautiful Joe versus Resident Evil Asterisk. There's an asterisk next to Resident Evil, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, you may recall the classic Hideki Kamiya game Beautiful Joe from GameCube. It was one of the Capcom 5. It's obviously Hideki Kamiya is a major Resident Evil guy. And in that game, that is a game where a cinephile character, Joe, jumps into the world of movies as a tokusatsu hero to rescue his girlfriend. What I propose is a sequel where Beautiful Joe jumps back into the screen, but it's specifically into the Hollywood Resident Evil movies by Paul W.S. Anderson. This is why the asterisk. And so he not only has to fight through very cheap sets and bad special effects, but he has to try solving the mystery. What the fuck does this have to do with Resident Evil? There's a bonus challenge level at the end where he has to do the same thing with Paul W.S. Anderson's Monster Hunter movie, but that level is unbeatable because there is no answer to the question, what the fuck does this have to do with Monster Hunter? It has nothing to do with Monster Hunter.
I love this idea. I love, like Joe trying to use, he's got all of his like rewind powers and all that kind of stuff, which is what that game is. But yes, it's him trying to put together the nightmare of what are these movies, and can the last boss just be Mila Jovovich, like a live action, like you get Mila Jovovich, and she records all this new live action material to be the boss, and it's just her playing herself, and it's just, you find out that she's the one who's been causing this the whole time.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Number 6 is I want some Resident Evil DLC in Super Smash Brothers. Just generally what Masahiro Sakurai did with all of the like extra characters in the Smash Ultimate DLC and like mixing up mechanics was so fun. He put Ryu and Ken in and like had Street Fighter moves, and you had like the hero from Dragon Quest, and there was like the little contextual menu you could do. You had Cloud from Final Fantasy who had the limit breaks and all of that. I want to see him do it with Resident Evil. I want to see what he would do with some of these characters, but mainly I want to have Chris Redfield in Smash Brothers so that his final smash can be the scene from Resident Evil 5 where he punches the boulder until it breaks.
This is incredible. The first thing I thought of when you said Resident Evil DLC in Smash Brothers is that Chris Redfield's final smash. Like, I was literally like...
Yes.
I was biting my tongue because I so desperately wanted to make that joke, and it's like, it's amazing. Our brains think exactly the same.
Yes, you just, you activate the final smash, the character gets like thrown off the screen, and then it is you punching the boulder, and then everything explodes. It'd be, honestly, that move, that's what that is for. That it feels like that is exactly what that weird-ass moment in Resident Evil 5 was always for.
Yes. The other thing is I want Chris to have tank controls. However the fuck that means, like, you have to push forward for him to go right or whatever direction he's facing, and then have him like try to turn him around. And so forward is on the control stick is forward from whatever direction the character's facing. That has to be how that character controls.
That'd be pretty fucking good. I'd like that.
Yes.
I mean,
think
it would be hard to play, but it would be amazing.
Yes.
All right. Number 5, Resident Street Fighter. On his world travels to attain fighting skills and enlightenment, Ryu stumbles into Raccoon City on the night of the outbreak chronicled in Resident Evil 1 through 3, so that original trilogy.
Yes.
Now he must fight his way through the zombie hordes. I see this as basically a cross between the sort of Resident Evil 2 and 3 gameplay, so same city setting, do some of the same exploration and puzzle solving, but crossed with the Street Fighter 6 World Tour mode, where Ryu controls like a Street Fighter character and has to battle zombies that way. This is all in the RE engine,
yes.
so they can do this. Just take the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake maps and use some of the Street Fighter 6 World Tour stuff, and it's Ryu having to go through, and maybe as he goes through, he finds like 10 locked in a basement, and you can have an extra character there, as other Street Fighter characters wind up in Raccoon City.
Yeah, I mean, I do love the idea of the Street Fighter 6 world map, or like world tour mode, and you're just like running around and Shoryukening a zombie to then turn it into a Street Fighter match, and you have to do a quick Street Fighter thing. That's amazing. And then, of course, it has to be Ryu fighting fucking Wesker at the end in a full, proper Street Fighter style, like, actual fight.
Maybe that can be a crossover where if that happens, then Wesker also becomes DLC for Street Fighter 6, and he can be one of the main characters in that game.
Yes. I want to say that Wesker was in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so I think he has a history of actually being, yes, he is in Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so he has a whole history of actually being a fighting game character, so this works great.
All right. So my number 4 this is one of the more creative ones I came up with. It is Miles Edgeworth, Demon Prosecutor. In the aftermath of the Raccoon City incident of Resident Evil 1 through 3, the world needs a lawyer who can bring the Umbrella Corporation to justice. And his name is Miles Edgeworth, who puts his prosecutorial skills to good use by representing the many displaced and dismembered citizens of Raccoon City in legal action against Umbrella, with many twists and turns as he realizes just how high the conspiracy goes. I originally wrote this as an Ace Attorney thing, but then I realized that Ace Attorney he's a defense attorney, so that doesn't work. But Miles is the prosecutor, so Miles is going to be our hero here. And Miles' nickname in those games is Demon Prosecutor. How bad, it's just perfect. It's just, you don't have to change a thing to do a visual novel mystery with Miles Edgeworth prosecuting the fuckers at Umbrella.
Yes, and I love the idea of just, like, at a certain point you're like, because, the lore of that shit gets so weird and labyrinthine, and you get to the stuff in, like, Village where it's like, and then at some point, I guess this guy went into, like, the fucking Eastern Europe, and he found, like, a weird mold? Like, I don't know, this is getting fucking crazy, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, it'd be pretty good.
It would.
All right. And there hasn't been a new Ace Attorney in a long time, right?
Yes.
I mean, Capcom's
they
sitting
keep
on
on
this.
just remaking them, so yeah.
Yeah, so here you go. My number 3 is Mega Man X Biohazard. However, despite that title, this is not a Mega Man X game. The X is a different X, all right? Yeah. So this is, what I'm imagining is we put Mega Man in a Resident Evil game, specifically something like Resident Evil 7 and 8, where it is first person. And this is also where Mega Man finally gets his Metroid Prime moment. Because the Resident Evil already has a lot of Metroid Prime kind of stuff, and it's a similar sort of like, exploration, puzzle solving kind of game. So we're going to do that with Mega Man. I think in the story, you've got to do a plot where Dr. Wily has been sent back in time, and he's working for the Umbrella Corporation and creating horrific machine zombie hybrids. And so Mega Man has to go back in time also and fight him. So you've got, like, maybe from a central hub area, you've got to defeat all of the robo-zombie masters and off of different, like, spokes of the area and go get their abilities. And I think this would be a cross between Mega Man, Resident Evil 7, and Metroid Prime. But it also means Mega Man would see some stuff that would scar him absolutely for life.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you just said Mega Man and then Resident Evil Village, immediately the thing that popped in my mind is the part in that game where Ethan gets his hand chopped off and he, sticks it on and pours the fucking, like, healing juice or whatever. And the thing that sort of, at first you're like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever, but then it foreshadows the fact that Ethan is actually a weird mold man at that point in the game. And I love that, but it's Mega Man and his arm cannon just gets sliced off by Lady Dimitrescu, and he has to stick it on and pour some goop on there to fix it.
Yeah, so I think this would be pretty fun.
Absolutely, yeah. And I want to see him fight all the goofy villains from Resident Evil Village as bosses, and he can fight, like, the Nemesis and Mr. X. There's a lot of good big Resident Evil monsters he can kill and get their powers.
Absolutely. All right, number 2 is Resident Evil 4, featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series.
Okay,
You may know that the original Devil May Cry started its life as Hideki Kamiya's prototype of what would be Resident Evil 4, before everyone realized that they were really making a different game, and so they decided to spin that off and make Devil May Cry. And then that's when Shinji Mikami came in and made the game that we now know as Resident Evil 4. So I think we need to have a game that is an homage to this quirk of history. I'm proposing a DLC for the Resident Evil 4 remake that lets you play through the entire campaign as Dante, and maybe you have some other Devil May Cry characters sprinkled throughout to replace our Resident Evil characters in the plot. That's just a fun little bonus for everybody.
Can Dante and Leon kiss?
Of course.
Okay.
Why not? Yeah.
I'm all in. That's what I need to happen. I need Dante, because I was just imagining Dante and Leon meeting, and immediately I realized the only way that ends is with them having sex with each other. It's like it might be why Capcom hasn't done it yet, is because they're not ready for that kind of sexual intimacy in one of their products.
See, my idea was that the game would start with Leon in the normal way, but something would go south where he gets, like, captured, and then Dante comes in. So maybe instead of Ashley being rescued by Leon, it's Leon being rescued by Dante, and they go to town.
Yes, and then they're on the fucking speed bike together at the end, and it's Leon, it's Dante. Well, Dante is the one piloting the speed bike, Leon's cradling him, and then Ashley's on the back. And they're just, like, whispering sweet nothings into each other's ears while Ashley's there very awkwardly as this third wheel, just being exposed by the incredible sensuality of these two adult men, one of whom was rookie cop Leon S. Kennedy. The other is the son of Sparta, the demon. But both of them, hard men on the outside, but very sensitive on the inside. And they're the only ones that know it.
I think they'd be pretty hard on the outside, too, once they get to know each other. All right. Come on, you gave me that one. All right. My number 1. Sean, do you remember way back when, early day, this was the Wii U era, when Atlas and Nintendo announced a partnership to make a Fire Emblem Shin Megami Tensei game?
Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Well, it wasn't called that at first. Eventually, we got a game that wasn't in any way, shape, or form a Shin Megami Tensei X Fire Emblem game. We got a game called Tokyo Mirage Sessions Sharp FE, which was an idle sim game that had Fire Emblem characters as, like, summonable spirits, I think?
Yes.
All right, same thing is going to happen. We are going to announce a Shin Megami Tensei Resident Evil crossover, Atlas and Capcom working together. The final game will be called Shinjuku Illusion Jam Bass Clef RE. And it will be the same kind of thing. We're going to have an idle sim game where various idols in Japan, it's very poppy colored, just like super, super fun and like light. But they keep finding mysterious VHS tapes scattered throughout the game world, which when viewed on the little TVs back in their trailers, reveal grisly events from the world of Resident Evil, which gradually transform their lives into a Perfect Blue-style psychological horror game.
Wow. Okay, this pitch has gone into some...
This sounds good, right?
Yes, into some crazy directions. Yeah. Yes, I like the twist on the idol, turning it into this sort of idol horror, of what, and I think you've got to, like, the entertainment industry does to these young women is something we need to explore here.
And I want the first, 20 hours of this game to be a pretty straightforward, Idolmaster clone or something like that. Just poppy, fun, not really thinking about the dark side of this. You're gradually finding some tapes, but you're a little, you're a 16-year-old girl in Japan. You do not have a VHS player. But then eventually, 20 hours into the game, you're at you're at a garage sale or something, and you find an old TV with one of those built-in VHS players, and you bring it back to your trailer, and you start watching these VHSs. And only then, dozens of hours into the game, does it start transforming into an homage to Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue. And it ends in just an incredibly fucked up place. And it will have that title. I was really proud of this stupid title. This is why this is number 1.
Yes,
I do think the title, Shinjuku Illusion Jam Bass Clef RE, is objectively a great title for a video game.
Yes, you can have Albert Wesker be the idol, the manager for your idol character, but he just seems like he's a totally normal, regular, fine dude. And then after it starts getting intense, you realize, he's the mastermind behind it all, and he's the one allowing all this horrible shit to happen.
I'm also imagining at some point this will have a scene like the one in Resident Evil 7 that is basically just a Saw movie where you're in that fucking bathroom watching the tapes. And yeah, we're going to have to do that at some point in the game.
Absolutely. I am down for, this is not where I thought the Resident Evil spinoff would go, but I'm here for it.
Okay, so that's my 10. The only major Capcom thing I really didn't feel like I could work in was Monster Hunter. I couldn't find a creative way to do Monster Hunter X Resident Evil. But Sean, I mean, which one of these would you be most excited for?
Which would I be most excited for is the Resident Evil rhythm dancing game that just uses unaltered tracks from the Resident Evil franchise of dark, upsetting, atmospheric horror music that you are hitting button prompts to vaguely a beat, a time signature, one could call it. That's, I don't know if I'm most excited to play that one. I'm the most excited at the idea of that game existing is very provocative to me.
All right. Well, Sean, are you ready to get your assignment for next month?
I'm very excited to make a list of 10 things, Jonathan. So tell me, what should I do?
I have to go on a bit of a walk for this one, all right?
Okay.
But, so the other day we started getting previews from journalists about this new Pokemon game that's coming out in March.
Yeah, Pokopia?
It's Pokemon Pokopia, yeah. And that game, I thought it looked kind of weird when they first announced it. It actually looks like it's pretty fantastic. I didn't realize until these previews came out, it's the same dev team that did Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2, which immediately, I'm going to buy it. I need to play this game. Like, Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2 are, like, secretly, like, two of the best games of the 2010s. So that sounds really fun. But, so this is, like, a game I'm looking forward to in March. But the thing about Pokemon Pokopia is that its premise is this absolute nightmare eldritch horror thing where you are playing as a Ditto who dittos a human girl and takes the body of a human girl and then starts dittoing different Pokemon powers, like a Squirtle having Water Gun or a Bulbasaur having Vine Whip, so that it can do like the Minecraft Stardew Valley stuff of like planting crops and building things and chopping down trees and all of that, right? So it's basically like that kind of, it's sort of like Minecraft, Stardew Valley. Apparently there's some Viva Pinata in there. Through the lens of Pokemon, through this Ditto who becomes the main player character. So I want to know, Sean, what other games can Pokemon do a spin-off of with the premise of a Ditto becomes the body that you play as? All right? And I know that's a broad topic, but I want to know this. Like, after Pokemon Pokopia, Game Freak has to put out at least like 3 Pokemon games a year at this point. What other games are we aping with this weird-ass premise of a Ditto as our main character?
Okay, so I've written top 10 games that Pokemon can do that has the premise that Ditto takes the body of the person you play as.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
And we're okay.
That's good. Yeah. So you get this. I'm not totally crazy.
I understand this. Yes, I understand where you're coming from. I think I'm going to have to let this cook in my brain for a little bit to come up with how I will approach this. This is definitely the weirdest top 10 we've done so far for a premise. But at least it seems like something where I'm luckily not seeing how I'm going to somehow turn this into a big creative writing project for me that's going to take hours, which I have a bad tendency of doing on these top 10 lists that I just don't have the time to spend on, but I end up making it bigger than I need to. So this feels like a more approachable thing because it's very hyper specific. But I absolutely understand the horror of the idea of this Ditto, this soulless being, this creature, this monster, this pocket monster that just takes on the form of a man, of a human, passing itself as one of us, but there's nothing behind the eyes, there's nothing in its heart, it's this empty fucking thing staring back at you. And what dark, what malicious purpose could this thing possibly have in our world? That's what I am excited to explore on my list.